I'm Emily, 34, and my husband Bob is 27. Although we didn't notice the age gap much during our dating years, it became more apparent once we decided to marry. When I first met his parents, I was struck by their rural home in the Northeast and their deeply conservative views. They were initially very resistant to our relationship because of our age difference. I remember their disapproval vividly, with comments like, "They say an older wife is a rare find, but 7 years is quite a lot. Can Emily even have children at her age? Won't her eggs be too old?" Such remarks could easily alienate most women. While the father-in-law was merely rude, the mother-in-law was outright hostile. She declared, "I refuse to accept this. Why does Bob need to marry someone 7 years older? It's too embarrassing to even discuss with the neighbors. He'll soon be back here to take over the family business. And with your city background, you're simply not suited to be our daughter-in-law." Bob and I had been together for 6 years, and I had devoted nearly all my late 20s to him. I was committed to marrying him, and after living together for a few years, I didn't have the energy to search for someone else. In my frustration, I pushed Bob into proposing, and he reluctantly agreed. Perhaps due to his youth or just his nature, he seemed to prefer keeping things as they were. When his parents opposed our engagement, he quickly shifted his stance, saying, "See, I told you it was too soon to get married. We can just register our marriage later." I responded firmly, "It's not too soon. The age difference will change no matter how much time passes." Turning back to his parents with a polite smile, I said, "Yes, I am older than Bob, but that's something beyond our control. I promise to do my best to prove myself as a worthy daughter-in-law. I'm not perfect, but I hope you can accept me." Though they agreed with some reluctance, Bob's sister was adamantly opposed. At our first meeting, she bluntly declared, "Just so you know, don't refer to me as your sister-in-law. It's completely unacceptable for my brother to marry someone older than me." Looking back, I realized I was naive. Yet, with the confidence of someone who had navigated difficult clients in my work, I believed I could handle it. I now understand what they call bride bullying. I convinced myself that moving back to the countryside to live with the in-laws was not as bad as the horror stories I had read online. I should have called off the wedding at that point, but as they say, hindsight is 20/20. Now, a year later, I deeply regret getting married. Although our daily life and work routines didn't change much after we registered our marriage, one major shift was the frequent phone calls Bob started receiving from his mother. I could only guess what they were about, likely questioning when we moved back home and probably urging him to consider divorce. Whenever Bob received calls from his mother, he would retreat to another room or the bathroom, trying to shield me from overhearing. But with our small apartment, it was impossible not to catch snippets of the conversation. I often heard phrases like, "So Emily was saying," and couldn't help but listen in. It seemed they were accusing me of opposing the idea of moving back to Bob's hometown to live with his parents, but that wasn't true. When I asked Bob about moving back, he had expressed reluctance, saying he didn't want to live somewhere without a nearby convenience store and where job opportunities were scarce. It seemed he was using me as a scapegoat for his own unwillingness to return home. It was frustrating to see Bob cast me as the villain to cover up his own hesitations. Just now, I overheard Bob in the next room saying, "So, if I bring up divorce, I'd have to pay alimony, right?" His hesitation about divorce wasn't rooted in any lingering affection for me, but rather in his aversion to paying alimony. Hearing his true feelings was disheartening. It might be time to seriously consider divorce. Although we don't have children, I began contemplating it privately without mentioning it to anyone. Shortly after, I received a call about Bob's sister's upcoming wedding, prompting us to take the express train back to his family's home for the ceremony. Despite Bob being considered the heir, our wedding had been a modest family dinner, while his sister's wedding was set to be a lavish event. I wanted to fulfill my social obligations and avoid any further fault on our part, despite the disparity. The wedding was scheduled for the middle of a 3-day weekend, so Bob and I arrived at his family's home the day before. Bob's sister's fiancé is from a neighboring city, and the wedding was set to take place at a venue there, with plans for the relatives to travel by chartered bus on the day of the event. As the family home became a hub for relatives, they began arriving in droves. The ceremony was set for just after 2:00 p.m. To avoid overcrowding the venue's dressing rooms, the venue staff, hairdressers and dressers came to the house, and even Bob's parents were getting dressed up. Our own wedding had been more of a simple family dinner, so we wore slightly nicer everyday clothes. The contrast in treatment was stark and surprising. I had changed into the dress I had splurged on for the occasion, done my makeup, and was setting my hair when my father-in-law called out, "Hey Emily, could you serve some refreshments to the relatives waiting?" With a smile, I began handing out refreshments, introducing myself with, "Nice to meet you. I'm Bob's wife. Please enjoy the refreshments," and trying to make my presence felt with the poise of a seasoned TV announcer. Despite my mother-in-law's suggestion to stay in Bob's room, I was eager to fulfill my role and make a good impression. I was determined to make a positive impression. Shortly after, the bus arrived to take us to the wedding venue. The relatives boarded with excitement, and as I prepared to join them, my mother-in-law called out, "Wait a minute, Emily. I forgot the pearl necklace. Could you go get it?" "Really, in this formal dress?" I asked. She insisted, "It's in the drawer on top of the dresser in my room. It's a keepsake from my mother. Please hurry and bring it." "Understood. I'll look for it now," I replied. I hurried to my mother-in-law's room and began searching through the cluttered dresser drawer. The necklace wasn't immediately visible, and with everyone else already on the bus, I started to feel anxious. After about 5 minutes, I found a box that looked promising. I opened it quickly and dashed to the entrance, only to see that the bus had already left. The entire family, including Bob, had departed without me. "You've got to be kidding," I exclaimed, rubbing my eyes in disbelief. The bus was nowhere in sight. I panicked, realizing I'd left my cell phone in my bag, which had already been loaded onto the bus. I knew the venue's name but didn't have the phone number. Without my phone, I couldn't reach Bob, and without my wallet, I couldn't even get a taxi. What was I going to do? For a moment, I felt a wave of despair, but then I thought, do we even need to go to the wedding? My enthusiasm for the event had completely evaporated. It wasn't just my first time meeting the relatives. Surely, my in-laws and Bob must have noticed I wasn't on the bus. Their departure without me seemed unnecessarily cruel. The idea of divorce crossed my mind, but simply ending the marriage seemed too easy. I wanted revenge. After some contemplation, I devised a plan. I stepped outside with a calm demeanor and a smile, preparing to execute my scheme. When the relatives, in-laws, and Bob returned from the wedding around 5:00 p.m., they were visibly drunk. By then, I had gathered all my belongings except for the bag that had gone with them. I found a taxi company's number in a phone book next to the in-laws' home phone and called, requesting a taxi to pick me up in 30 minutes. Everything was set. I greeted them at the bus with an innocent expression. Bob's face showed guilt when he saw me, but he didn't say a word. My in-laws ignored me, preoccupied with sending off the relatives. The relatives glanced my way but left in their cars. I wished Bob would at least offer an apology, but that's just how he was. With a forced smile, I said to Bob, "Welcome back." He looked visibly relieved and began making excuses. "I didn't realize you weren't on the bus." I felt bad, but the ceremony was starting, so I couldn't come back for you. I ignored his excuses and started searching through the luggage for my bag, silently conveying my disbelief. I turned to him and said, "Divorce? Is this some kind of joke? Because it certainly feels like one." When Bob realized what I had said, he began to panic. "Who knows? I'm surprised you think such a petty lie would work. So what if you weren't noticed? Are you saying you forgot I existed until you saw me?" While both of his parents were awful, the real disappointment was Bob. He was left speechless, unable to defend himself. Then my father-in-law, after sending off the relatives, chimed in, "Come on, it was just a little forgetfulness on both sides. Bob's talking about divorce over something like this? City brides are really spineless." It seemed he was actually in favor of the divorce. My mother-in-law, upon hearing about it, smirked and said, "I knew it. A city bride just doesn't fit in. She was never right for our family." Her hypocrisy infuriated me. If that was how they felt, they should have just invited Bob to the wedding alone. Why make me travel all this way only to leave me behind? Anyone would be outraged by such treatment, whether they're a city bride or a country bride. When I shouted, my mother-in-law shouted back, "We never intended to invite you in the first place. There wasn't even a seat prepared for you. Bob brought you along by mistake, so we left you behind." "What?" I was shocked by her audacity. As I glared, Bob quickly looked away and shifted the blame to his mother, saying, "Well, Mom didn't explicitly say to come alone, so I assumed it meant as a couple." My mother-in-law's unreasonable anger continued. "And why did you go around serving tea and introducing yourself as the bride?" At the venue, relatives were asking why the wife didn't show up, not realizing Bob was even married. It made us look foolish. That's your own fault, and it's absurd to say I shouldn't introduce myself, I retorted. It seemed my effort to introduce myself as Bob's wife to the relatives had made an impact. So, you never intended to acknowledge me and planned to divorce me eventually. That's why you kept our wedding a secret from the relatives and made it seem like just a dinner party. Neither my father-in-law nor my mother-in-law responded, but their silence confirmed my suspicions. It was clear to me that severing ties with this family was the right decision. Fine, I'll grant your wish and divorce you. I'm better off without a hostile family and an unreliable husband. I boarded the taxi that had just arrived and took the last train back to my apartment. Unable to sleep that night, I impulsively searched for lawyers online and began packing my belongings. I kept myself busy until dawn. When I finally woke up late the next day, I found several missed calls from Bob and my in-laws. It seemed my revenge had made its mark. After being left behind, I came up with a plan for revenge, but I wanted to keep it within the bounds of safety and legality. I didn't want to just divorce and suffer in silence without making a statement. I recalled how concerned my mother-in-law was about the neighbors' opinions. There was a surplus of refreshments and snacks she had bought for the relatives, so I decided to use them. I bagged up the leftover treats and set out around the neighborhood, greeting everyone with a smile. "Hello, I'm Bob's wife," I announced, and proceeded to share everything about how I had been treated and left behind on the wedding day. That evening, my mother-in-law and I had a loud argument outside. Naturally, the entire neighborhood heard, a perfect form of revenge for a family so worried about their public image. Afterward, Bob and I divorced without any major complications. The stories I shared were framed as casual conversations, so I wasn't sued for defamation. With the help of a lawyer, I was able to claim compensation for the abandonment and secure a satisfactory settlement. As for my sister-in-law, her marriage quickly unraveled. She had concealed her difficult personality to get married, but people rarely change. Her true nature emerged, and the marriage soared rapidly. Within 6 months, she had divorced and moved back to her parents' home. By then, the incident of my abandonment had become a notorious rumor. Eventually, the in-laws gained a reputation as a vile family that mistreated their daughter-in-law, leading to a much more subdued existence. Bob's prospects of finding a new bride in his hometown seemed bleak. I learned all this from a neighbor I had befriended and exchanged phone numbers with. It felt like perfect justice. For me, the divorce felt like a new beginning. I regretted not recognizing the true nature of Bob and his family sooner, but now I had a clear perspective. Perhaps I should have withdrawn immediately when faced with their initial opposition, but I was young and naive. I don't want to disregard the happy moments we shared, so I see the past year as a valuable lesson for my future. I'm relieved to have resolved the situation and moved on. The Martinez family mansion had always felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Even as a child, visiting my grandparents for mandatory Sunday dinners, I'd find myself pausing in certain hallways, overcome by déjà vu. The curve of the grand staircase, the way sunlight fell through the stained glass windows in the library, the peculiar echo of footsteps in the east wing. It all resonated with something deep in my memory. "Elena, stop dawdling," grandmother would snap, catching me running my fingers along the mahogany wainscoting. "A lady doesn't touch the walls." But I couldn't help it. The house called to me, like it held secrets I was meant to discover. Now, at 35, standing in that same foyer with my adopted son Michael's hand in mine, I finally understood why. "Mrs. Harrison," the housekeeper's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Your grandparents are waiting in the study." I squeezed Michael's hand reassuringly. At 6 years old, he was already too perceptive, picking up on the tension thrumming through the house. "It's okay, Mio," I whispered. "Remember what we talked about?" He nodded solemnly, his dark eyes serious beneath his unruly curls. "Best behavior. No whining. No touching anything." "That's right. This won't take long." But as we approached the study, I knew I was lying to myself. This conversation had been brewing for months, ever since I'd announced my decision to adopt Michael. My grandparents' reaction had been predictably cold. "A Mexican orphan," grandmother had said during that first phone call, her voice dripping with disdain. "Really, Elena? If you're so desperate for a child, we could have arranged a proper adoption. There are agencies that specialize in better backgrounds." I'd ended that call abruptly, but the comments kept coming. Subtle digs during family events, pointed remarks about bloodlines and heritage. casual mentions of other potential heirs who had real claims to the Martinez fortune. The study door swung open, revealing my grandparents in their usual positions, grandfather behind his massive desk, grandmother perched on the antique settee by the window. They looked like aristocrats from another era, which I suppose they were, in their minds at least. "Elena," grandfather's voice was clipped. Punctual as always, his eyes fell on Michael, narrowing slightly. "I see you brought the boy." "Michael," I corrected firmly. "Your great-grandson's name is Michael." "Please sit." Grandmother gestured to the leather chairs facing the desk. "Maria, bring us tea, and perhaps some juice for the child." Michael climbed into one of the oversized chairs, his feet dangling above the Persian carpet. He looked so small in that imposing room, surrounded by oil paintings of stern-faced Martinez ancestors. But his spine was straight, his expression composed. Pride swelled in my chest. My son might not have their blood, but he had more dignity in his little finger than they had in their entire bodies. "We've asked you here today," grandfather began, shuffling through papers on his desk, "to discuss a matter of some delicacy. As you know, your father's passing last year significantly altered the family's succession plans. My father's death had been unexpected. A heart attack at 58. We hadn't been close, his dedication to the family business leaving little time for actual family, but his death had still left a hole in my life. More significantly, it had left a hole in the Martinez family hierarchy. As an only child, I was suddenly next in line for everything: the business, the properties, the responsibility of carrying on the family name. The Martinez legacy spans 6 generations, grandmother added, accepting a teacup from Maria. 6 generations of careful marriages, strategic alliances, and proper breeding. Surely you understand why we have concerns about your recent decisions. "If you mean my decision to adopt Michael," I said evenly, "I don't see how that affects anything. He's my son, legally and in every way that matters." "But he's not a Martinez." Grandfather's voice was sharp. "Not really. The family trust is quite specific about bloodlines and inheritance. We've had our lawyers review everything, and they agree. Adopted children have no claim to the primary estate." I felt Michael stiffen beside me. Though young, he was old enough to understand rejection when he heard it. I placed a protective hand on his shoulder. "That's fascinating," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Especially since I distinctly remember you telling me that family was about more than blood when you took me in after my mother disappeared." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Grandmother's teacup clattered against its saucer. Grandfather's face went through several interesting color changes. That was different," he sputtered. "Was it? Because I've been thinking a lot about that lately. About how quickly you stepped in to raise me when Mom vanished. About how you never seemed to look for her, never filed a missing persons report. About how familiar this house has always felt." "Elena," grandmother's voice held a warning. "Some things are better left in the past." But I wasn't finished. "I hired a private investigator last month. Would you like to know what he found?" Grandfather stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This meeting is over. Take the boy and go." "His name is Michael," I said again, standing as well. "And we're not going anywhere until we discuss the DNA test results I received yesterday." The color drained from grandmother's face. Grandfather gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. In the heavy silence, I could hear the antique clock ticking on the mantel, marking seconds that felt like hours. "What DNA test?" grandmother finally whispered. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. "It's interesting, isn't it? How much family secrets can cost. How much people will pay to keep them buried. But you know what's even more interesting?" I placed the envelope on grandfather's desk. "How much truth can reveal itself through simple genetics." "Mammy?" Michael's voice was small, uncertain. "Can we go home now?" "Soon, Mio," I promised, not taking my eyes off my grandparents. "First, we need to hear a story. A story about a young maid who worked in this house 29 years ago. A maid who caught the attention of the family's only son. A maid who disappeared shortly after giving birth to a baby girl." Grandmother's teacup slipped from her trembling fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the study like a gunshot. "Her name was Isabella Ramirez," I continued, my voice steady despite the thunder of my heart. "She was 16 when she started working here. 17 when she caught my father's eye, 18 when she disappeared. You have no proof. Grandfather's voice was hoarse. These are wild accusations. I opened the envelope, spreading its contents across his desk. Birth records from St. Mary's Hospital. Police reports that were mysteriously never filed. Bank transfers to an account in Mexico. And DNA results showing that Isabella Ramirez was my biological mother. Michael watched wide-eyed as papers scattered across the polished mahogany. He might not understand everything happening, but he knew this moment was important. What did you do to her? I asked, finally voicing the question that had haunted me for decades. Grandmother stood shakily, smoothing her silk dress with trembling hands. We did what was necessary. For the family. For you. For me? I laughed bitterly. You sent my mother away, erased her existence, and raised me as your granddaughter. All for me. Your father was engaged to Margaret Wellington. Grandfather snapped. The merger between our companies would have secured the Martinez empire for generations. We couldn't let some maid's indiscretion ruin everything. Indiscretion? The word tasted like poison. I was a baby, a human being, not some scandal to be covered up. We gave you everything, grandmother insisted. The best schools, the finest clothes, a place in society. If people had known the truth. If people had known the truth? What? That the great Martinez family wasn't as pure as they pretended. That your precious son got a teenage maid pregnant and you paid to make her disappear. Grandfather slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 78 years. We paid her well. Set her up with a new life in Mexico. She agreed never to contact you. Did she agree, or did you threaten her? The silence that followed was answer enough. How much? How much did my mother's silence cost? $50,000, grandmother whispered, and a promise that you would be cared for. The number hit me like a physical blow. $50,000. That's what they thought a mother's love was worth. That's what they paid to steal my heritage, my identity, my truth. And now you have the audacity to tell me my son isn't real family? I pulled Michael close to me. That he doesn't deserve to inherit because he's adopted. Because he's Mexican. That's different, grandfather began. But I cut him off. No, it's exactly the same. You're still trying to control who belongs in this family based on your twisted ideas of blood and status. Well, guess what? By your own logic, I'm not a real Martinez either. I'm the daughter of a Mexican maid you paid to disappear. But you're still blood, grandmother protested. Still our great-granddaughter. And Michael is still my son, I shot back. My child, whom I chose to love, just as you chose to raise me. Or was that just about protecting your precious reputation? I pulled another document from my bag, this one fresh from my lawyer's office. I'm not just here about the DNA test. I've spent the last month digging through property records, trying to understand why this house always felt so familiar. Grandfather's face went ashen. Elena. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that this mansion wasn't built by Martinez money at all. It was inherited through marriage, specifically through my grandmother's side of the family, the Ramirez side. I spread out the property records, yellowed with age but clear in their implications. Isabella Ramirez wasn't just any maid. She was the granddaughter of the original house staff, whose family had served here for generations. She grew up in the servants' quarters, playing in these halls just like I did. That's why everything feels familiar. This house is in my blood, but not the way you thought. Grandmother sank back onto the settee, her composure finally cracking. How did you find all this? Property records are public, and old servants talk, especially when someone asks the right questions. Maria? I called out, knowing the housekeeper was listening from a hallway. Would you join us, please? Maria entered, her gray hair neat under her cap, her spine straight despite her years. She'd been here as long as I could remember, always watching, always silent. Until now. I knew Isabella, she said quietly, helped raise her after her parents died. Watched her grow up in these halls, and I watched them send her away when she needed us most. You knew. Grandmother's voice was barely a whisper. All these years. We all knew, Maria replied. The whole staff knew. We kept your secrets, protected your lies, but we never forgot. I took Michael's hand, drawing strength from his presence. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over control of the family trust to me, not as your granddaughter, but as Isabella Ramirez's daughter. the rightful heir to both sides of this legacy. And if we refuse, grandfather's attempt at defiance was weakened by the tremor in his voice. Then everything comes out. The pregnancy, the cover-up, the payoff. I wonder how the board of directors would react to learning that their chairman engineered the disappearance of a teenage girl, or that the great Martinez family fortune is built on stolen inheritance and buried secrets. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed the hour, its deep tones reverberating through the heavy silence. Finally, grandfather reached for his pen. "What will you do?" grandmother asked as he began signing the papers my lawyer had prepared. "With the business, the house, everything." I looked down at Michael, who had been watching the entire scene with quiet dignity. "I'm going to build something new, something honest, a legacy that doesn't depend on lies and shame." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and financial transitions. My grandparents retired to their villa in Spain, their carefully constructed world of privilege and pretense crumbling around them. The family business underwent a transformation, with new policies emphasizing transparency and ethical practices. But the real work was personal. With Maria's help and my investigators' contacts, I finally tracked down Isabella Ramirez. She was living in a small town outside Mexico City, teaching at a local school. The woman who opened the door to my knock had my eyes, my smile, and 29 years of pain etched into her face. "Elena," she whispered, reaching out to touch my cheek, as if she couldn't believe I was real. "Mom," I replied, the word feeling both foreign and deeply right on my tongue. We spent hours talking, crying, sharing the stories of our separated lives. She told me about growing up in this very house, about falling in love with my father despite knowing it was forbidden, about being given an impossible choice. "They said you would have a better life without me," she explained, tears rolling down her cheeks. "That you would be educated, privileged, protected. I was so young, so scared. I convinced myself they were right." "They weren't," I said firmly, holding her hand. "No privilege is worth losing your mother." When I introduced her to Michael, she wept again, this time with joy. "My grandson," she said in Spanish, gathering him into her arms. "Mi nieto precioso." Michael, who had been learning Spanish since I adopted him, replied shyly, "Hola, abuela." The Martinez mansion has changed now. The stern portraits of past patriarchs have been replaced with photographs showing the true history of the house, including pictures of the generations of staff who kept it running. The servants' quarters have been converted into a community center, offering education and support to immigrant families. Isabella, my mother, splits her time between Mexico and here, teaching Spanish and sharing stories about the house's history. Michael adores her, soaking up the language and culture that should have been my birthright. Last week, we hosted a family dinner in the formal dining room. But instead of the cold, hierarchical affairs I remember from childhood, this one was warm and loud and real. Maria and the other staff sat with us as equals. My mother's laughter rang through the halls. Michael ran around the table, no longer constrained by rules about proper behavior. "Mommy," he asked later that night as I tucked him into bed, "are we a normal family now?" I thought about our unconventional household, the adopted son, the long-lost mother, the staff-turned-family, all the hidden stories finally brought into the light. "No, mio," I replied, kissing his forehead. "We're not normal. We're real, and that's much better." The next morning, I found my mother in the library, running her fingers along the same mahogany wainscoting that had always drawn me. "I used to do this too," she said, smiling at the memory. "The house remembers, even when people try to forget." "Did you ever think you'd be back here?" I asked, joining her by the window. "Never," she admitted. "But life has a way of bringing truth to light. Your son taught me that." I raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Because you chose him with love, just as I chose to have you. The Martinezes never understood that family isn't about blood or status or inheritance. It's about love, about choice, about seeing the truth in each other's hearts." As if summoned by our conversation, Michael appeared in the doorway, proudly carrying a book of Spanish stories Maria had given him. "Abuela," he called out, "will you read with me?" My mother's face lit up with joy. "Of course, my amor. Come, sit with us." As I watched them settle onto the window seat, sunlight streaming through the stained glass and casting rainbow patterns across their faces, I finally understood why this house had always called to me. It wasn't just the physical structure that felt familiar. It was the echoes of love, of belonging, of truth that had been buried but never forgotten. The Martinez family legacy didn't end with my revelation. It was reborn, transformed into something stronger and more beautiful than mere bloodlines could create. In the end, the greatest inheritance wasn't the money or the property or the family name. It was the courage to choose love over pretense, truth over tradition, and real family over rigid rules about who belongs and who doesn't. Every Sunday now, we still have family dinners in the big house. But instead of cold silence and careful manners, the rooms ring with laughter, with stories in English and Spanish, with the sound of children running through halls that once echoed only with whispered secrets. And in these moments, I look at my chosen son and my found mother, at the family we've built from the ashes of lies. And I know that some inheritances are worth more than all the Martinez millions combined. They say home is where the heart is. But sometimes, home is also where the truth finally breaks free, where long-buried love resurfaces, and where new stories begin. In the end, that's the only legacy worth passing on. The restaurant business is built on secrets. Secret recipes, secret techniques, secret deals made in back rooms over glasses of wine. But the biggest secret in my family's restaurant chain wasn't written in any cookbook. It was the truth about who really created our success. I'm Elena Romano, former executive chef and now ex-COO of Romano's Italian Kitchen, a chain of restaurants my family built from a single neighborhood trattoria into a regional empire. At least that's what the official story says. The truth, like most family stories, is more complicated. It started in my grandmother's kitchen 50 years ago. Nonna Maria didn't just cook food, she created magic. Her tomato sauce was legendary in our Little Italy neighborhood, people lining up around the block just to get a taste. The recipe was her closely guarded secret, passed down from her mother in Naples, or so everyone thought. The reality? Nonna Maria created that sauce recipe herself, experimenting late at night after long days working in other people's restaurants. I know because I was there, perched on a kitchen stool at age 8, watching her add pinches of this and dashes of that, taking careful notes in my little notebook. Remember piccola, she'd say in her thick Italian accent, a recipe is more than ingredients. It's love, it's timing, it's knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them. By the time I was 12, I knew that sauce recipe better than my own name. Nonna Maria made sure of it, teaching me every subtle variation, every seasonal adjustment. My father Thomas, her only son, was too busy with the business side to learn. My brother Marco was more interested in playing restaurant owner than learning to cook. The sauce is the heart of everything, Nonna would tell me. Without it, we're just another Italian restaurant. With it, we're Romano's. She was right. When my father opened the first Romano's Italian Kitchen in 1985, it was Nonna's sauce that made us special. As we expanded to more locations, that sauce remained our signature, our secret weapon. Every batch had to be made by either Nonna Maria or, increasingly as she got older, by me. The business grew rapidly through the 1990s and early 2000s. 5 locations became 10, then 15. My father handled the business expansion, Marco glad-handed with investors, and I ran the kitchens, protecting the quality of our food, especially that sauce. Nonna Maria passed away in 2015, leaving me as the only person who knew the complete recipe. All our other chefs had versions of it, but never the whole thing. Key ingredients were pre-mixed at our commissary kitchen. Certain steps were kept deliberately vague in the manual. It was safer that way, Dad always said. Can't risk our secret getting out. What nobody knew was that Nonna had legally transferred ownership of the recipe to me years before she died. The sauce belongs to the cook, she'd said, making me promise to protect it. I filed the paperwork away, never thinking I'd need it. Then Dad had his heart attack. It was sudden, massive, leaving no time for goodbyes or final instructions. One minute he was complaining about the cost of imported olive oil. The next he was gone. The family was devastated, but business doesn't stop for grief. I thought the succession plan was clear. I'd been effectively running operations for years, maintaining our quality standards while introducing new menu items that kept us current. The customers loved us. Our profits were strong. Our employees stayed forever. Marco handled marketing and public relations, which suited his personality. But I underestimated my brother's ambition and my mother's blindness when it came to her only son. The shareholders' meeting was scheduled for 1 month after Dad's funeral. I spent that time keeping our restaurants running, making sure our customers and employees felt secure despite the change in leadership. Marco spent it lobbying board members and making deals. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, secretive meetings I wasn't invited to, sympathetic looks from longtime employees. But I was grieving, distracted, still believing in family loyalty. The meeting started normally enough. Standard reports, financial updates, moment of silence for Dad. Then Marco stood up to present his vision for the future. Romano's needs to evolve, he announced, pacing the conference room like he was giving a TED talk. We need to think bigger, expand faster, push into new markets, streamline operations, maximize profitability. I felt a chill as he outlined his plans. Cheaper ingredients to cut food costs, simplified menu to reduce kitchen complexity, pre-made sauces from a commercial manufacturer to ensure consistency. But the sauce, I started to protest, is a relic of the past. Marco cut me off smoothly. Charming family history, but not scalable. Modern restaurants need modern solutions. I looked around the room, seeing heads nodding. Even my mother, who'd practically lived on Nana's cooking, seemed convinced. Furthermore, Marco continued, this transition requires strong, pragmatic leadership. Someone who can make tough decisions without being emotionally attached to outdated methods. And there it was, the knife sliding between my ribs with surgical precision. The vote was quick, clinical. Marco as CEO, supported by a new executive team of his choosing. My position as COO would be eliminated, replaced by a streamlined management structure. You'll be taken care of course, Marco said afterward, all fraternal concern. A generous severance package, consulting fees. Maybe you could write a cookbook. I sat there, numb, as he outlined my professional funeral. Mother patted my hand, murmuring about how this was for the best, how I could finally have a life outside the restaurants. They didn't understand. The restaurants were my life. That sauce was my heritage, my connection to Nana Maria, the heart of everything we'd built. I left the meeting in a daze, barely registering the sympathetic glances from employees who'd already heard the news. In my office, I stared at the old photos on the wall. Nana Maria and me in the original kitchen, Dad cutting the ribbon at our 10th location, family celebrations marked by food and laughter. My phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Need you to transfer all recipes and procedures to new corporate chef by Friday, especially the sauce details. Time to pass the torch. That emoji felt like a slap. He thought he'd won, thought he could just take everything our family had built and turn it into another soulless chain restaurant. He'd forgotten one crucial detail, something Nana Maria had taught me long ago in that tiny kitchen. Some secrets are worth keeping. Some recipes belong to the cook. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder I hadn't looked at in years. Inside was a document filed with the patent office the year before Nana died. A legal registration of intellectual property signed by Maria Romano and witnessed by her lawyer. My hands didn't shake as I took a photo of the document and sent it to our family lawyer, Mr. Rossi. His response came within minutes. Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't sign anything. Don't give anyone any recipes. I looked around my office at the life I'd helped build, the legacy they wanted to erase. Marco thought he was getting everything. He was about to learn that some things can't be bought, sold, or stolen. Even the best sauce needs time to simmer. Mr. Rossi's office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same leather chairs, same photos of Italian landscapes, same faint smell of espresso. But this morning, something was different. Maybe it was the extra people in the room. Along with Mr. Rossi, there was a patent attorney, a restaurant industry consultant, and surprisingly, Tony Martelli, our head of operations who'd been with us since the first location opened. Thank you all for coming, Mr. Rossi began, sliding on his reading glasses. We have an interesting situation here. Interesting was an understatement. Over the next hour, the patent attorney confirmed what Nana Maria had set up years ago. The sauce recipe wasn't just a family secret. It was a registered trade secret, legally assigned to me. The restaurant chain had been licensing it all this time through a separate company Nana had created, with me as the sole owner. Your grandmother was quite clever, the patent attorney said, reviewing the documents. She structured this to protect both the recipe and your position in the company. The licensing agreement requires the sauce to be produced under your direct supervision, Using your approved methods. Tony cleared his throat. That explains why she always insisted Elena oversee sauce production, even after we grew to 15 locations. The restaurant consultant, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Chen, had been studying our financial reports. The sauce isn't just your signature item, she said, looking up. It's the foundation of your entire menu. Marinara, vodka sauce, the special Sunday gravy. They all start with this base. Without it, we're just another Italian chain. I finished echoing Nana's words from so long ago. Mr. Rossi leaned forward. Marco has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's planning to announce his new partnership with national food distributors to supply pre-made sauces to all locations. My stomach turned at the thought of our restaurants serving mass-produced sauce from a factory. Can he do that? Not without breaching the licensing agreement, the patent attorney said, which would allow you to withdraw permission to use the recipe at all. That would cripple the business, Tommy warned. Our customers come for that sauce. They can taste the difference. Exactly, Sarah nodded. And here's something else to consider. I've reviewed the expansion plans Marco presented. He's leveraged the company heavily, borrowed against projected growth from 30 new locations in the next 2 years, all based on cutting costs and streamlining operations. I saw where this was going, so if the sauce suddenly wasn't available, the projections would collapse, she confirmed. Along with the financing, we spent the next few hours developing a strategy. By the time I left Mr. Rossi's office, I knew exactly what I had to do. The boardroom was packed the next morning. Marco had brought in his new executive team, all sharp suits and PowerPoint presentations. Mother sat in her usual place, looking uncertain. I noticed she was wearing the necklace Nana Maria had given her on her wedding day. Marco started his presentation with typical flair: growth projections, market penetration strategies, cost-cutting measures. The sauce change was presented as a minor operational detail, barely worth mentioning. And with these new efficiencies, he concluded, we project expanding to 50 locations within 5 years. The Romano's brand will become a national powerhouse. The board members looked impressed. Mother was beaming. Marco shot me a smug smile as he sat down. Any questions? The board chairman asked. Just one. I stood slowly, placing Nana's original recipe book on the table. Has anyone reviewed the licensing agreement for our signature sauce? Marco's smile faltered slightly. That's just a formality. All recipes and processes belong to the corporation. Actually, Mr. Rossi said, entering right on cue, that's not correct. He distributed copies of the licensing agreement to each board member. The sauce recipe is owned by a separate entity controlled by Elena Romano. Its use by Romano's Italian kitchen is subject to specific conditions. The room erupted in confusion. Marco's face turned red as he snatched a copy of the agreement. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. Mother, tell them this can't be right. But Mother was staring at the signature page at Nana Maria's familiar handwriting. She never said, she whispered. Nana understood something you've forgotten, Marco, I said, keeping my voice calm. A restaurant isn't just a business. It's a promise to our customers, a connection to our heritage. That sauce isn't just a recipe, it's our grandmother's legacy. The new executives were whispering urgently to each other, reviewing documents on their tablets. I knew what they were realizing, how dependent their plans were on having access to our signature sauce. The licensing agreement is very specific, Mr. Rossi continued. Any change in sauce production methods or ingredients must be approved by the recipe owner. Furthermore, production must be overseen by Elena Romano personally. We'll challenge it, Marco snapped. Corporate owns all intellectual property. You can try, the patent attorney said, joining us. But during the legal process, which could take years, you would lose the right to use the recipe at all. How do you think that would affect your expansion plans? Sarah Chen stepped forward, presenting her analysis of how losing the sauce would impact the company's projections and financing. The numbers weren't pretty. I watched Marco's face as his perfect plan crumbled. The board members were murmuring, shuffling papers, shooting concerned glances at each other. His new executives looked increasingly uncomfortable. There is another option, I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. The restaurants work because we balance tradition and progress. The old and the new. I've spent years modernizing our kitchens, improving efficiency while protecting quality. We can expand, but not by sacrificing what makes us special. I laid out my own plan, measured growth, maintained quality, innovation that enhance rather than replace our traditions. As I spoke, I saw heads nodding, saw the board members remembering why our restaurant succeeded in the first place. And the sauce, Marco demanded, stays exactly as Nana created it, made fresh, made right, made with love. That's not negotiable. The board's vote was unanimous. Marco's expansion plan was rejected. His new executives were thanked for their time and dismissed. I was reinstated as COO with expanded responsibilities for maintaining quality across all locations. And my brother, I asked, watching Marco storm out of the room, will remain as head of marketing, the chairman said, where he can focus on his strengths without overreaching. Mother caught up with me after the meeting, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Elena. I should have seen what was happening. It's okay, Mom, I hugged her. We all miss Dad. We all want to honor his memory. We just had different ideas about how to do it. That evening, I went back to the original restaurant location. The dinner rush was over, but the kitchen was still warm, filled with the familiar scent of simmering sauce. Tony was there, checking inventory like he'd done thousands of times before. Just like old times, he smiled. You know, your grandmother told me this would happen someday. Said Marco had your father's ambition, but not his heart. Said you had her spirit, the soul of a true cook. I opened Nana's recipe book, running my fingers over her handwritten notes. She taught me that a recipe is more than ingredients. Sigh, he grinned. It's love, it's timing. And knowing when to follow the rules and when to break them, I finished. 6 months have passed since that board meeting. Our restaurants are thriving, expanding thoughtfully into carefully chosen locations. Marco has actually proven to be a better marketing director when he's not trying to run everything. His latest campaign about authentic family recipes made with love is our most successful ever. Mother spends more time in the restaurants now, sharing stories about Nana Maria with our staff, teaching them that good food is about more than profit margins. Sometimes I catch her in the kitchen, closing her eyes as she smells the sauce, smiling at memories only she can see. Yesterday, a food critic wrote that Romano's manages something rare in the restaurant industry, growing without losing its soul. He called our sauce a taste of tradition in a modern world. Nana Maria would have liked that review. She always said a good sauce, like a good life, needs the right balance of ingredients. Sweet and sharp, old and new, tradition and innovation, all simmering together to create something special. Last week, I found my old childhood notebook, the one where I carefully recorded Nana's lessons. On the last page, in her handwriting, was a note I'd never noticed before. Remember, piccola, the secret ingredient isn't in the sauce. It's in the heart of the cook. Guard it well. I'm teaching my niece how to make the sauce now. Marco's daughter Sofia, just turned 8, perches on the same kind of kitchen stool I once used, scribbling in her own notebook. She has Nana's eyes, bright and curious, watching everything. Why do we add the basil last? She asked yesterday. Because some things can't be rushed, I told her, stirring the pot slowly. They need time to develop, to become what they're meant to be. She nodded seriously, writing it down. Another generation learning our family's real secret, that the best recipes aren't just about food. They're about love, tradition, and the courage to protect what matters most. Marco stops by sometimes, watching Sophia learn the family legacy he almost destroyed. I see regret in his eyes, but also understanding. He's learning too, in his own way. The sauce still simmers in our kitchens, still brings people back again and again. But now everyone knows why, not because of secret ingredients or clever marketing, but because every batch is made the way Nana taught me, with patience, with pride, and with love. That's one recipe that will never change. The day I inherited Bella Vista Vineyard was the day my family showed their true colors. Not that I was surprised. The Rosses had always been more interested in wine profits than winemaking. But watching them see as Aunt Marie's will was read, I realized just how little they understood about her legacy. My name is Isabella Romano, and my aunt had just left me what my family called 40 acres of worthless grapes. What they didn't know was that those grapes were about to reveal a secret that would shake the wine world to its core. This is ridiculous, Uncle Marco fumed, pacing the law office in his Italian leather shoes. Marie was clearly not in her right mind. The vineyard should go to someone who understands the business. By someone, he meant his son Anthony, who had spent the last decade trying to convince Aunt Marie to sell Bella Vista to a major wine conglomerate. She'd refused every offer, watching quietly as the vineyard's reputation declined, and its wines became, in critics' words, unremarkable. "The will is quite clear, Mr. Patterson," Marie's longtime attorney stated firmly. "Bella Vista Vineyard, including all property, equipment, and assets, goes to Isabella Romano. There are no conditions or restrictions. She's a librarian." My cousin Sophia scoffed, adjusting her designer sunglasses. What does she know about wine? More than they realized. While they saw me as the quiet bookworm who chose an academia over the family business, they'd forgotten who had spent every summer at Bella Vista since childhood, who had learned every aspect of winemaking at Aunt Marie's side, who had inherited her sensitive palate and love for the art of wine. Mary spent 20 years running that vineyard into the ground. Uncle Marco continued. "The soil's depleted, the vines are old, the wine is mediocre. Take our offer, Isabella. We'll give you fair market value, and you can go back to your books." I thought about the last conversation I'd had with Aunt Marie just a week before she passed. She'd been sitting in her study at Bella Vista, surrounded by old wine journals and vintage bottles. "Patience, my dear," she'd said, her eyes twinkling with that familiar mischief. "The truth, like the finest wine, reveals itself to those who know how to wait." "I'm keeping the vineyard," I said firmly, gathering the deed and other documents from Mr. Patterson. "You're making a mistake," Anthony warned. "That place hasn't produced anything worth drinking in 20 years. If only they knew." The drive to Bella Vista took 40 minutes, winding through the Sonoma Valley. The late afternoon sun gilded the rows of grapevines that generations of my family had tended. To untrained eyes, they might look neglected, even sickly, but I saw what Aunt Marie had taught me to see: vines that had been carefully stressed, forced to drive their roots deep into the mineral-rich soil. The main house was a rambling Spanish colonial, its white walls glowing in the sunset. This had been my sanctuary during childhood summers, escaping my parents' constant social climbing in San Francisco. Here, Aunt Marie had taught me that winemaking wasn't about profit margins, it was about patience, tradition, and secrets passed down through generations. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. The kitchen still smelled of herbs and coffee. Her collection of vintage corkscrews hung on the wall. Her wine journals filled the study shelves, each volume meticulously documenting decades of harvests, fermentations, and blends. But something was different. On her desk, in the spot where she always laid out her daily work, sat a single key with a note in her elegant handwriting. "For Isabella, when you're ready to know the truth." I recognized the key's distinctive design. It was older than the others on her ring, its brass worn smooth by time. But I'd never seen her use it. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Marcus Torres, Bella Vista's vineyard manager for the past 30 years, stood on the porch with a sympathetic smile. "Thought you might need some help getting settled," he said. I heard about the will reading. Marcus had been Aunt Marie's right hand, the only person she trusted completely with the vineyard's operations. He taught me about soil composition and root systems, while other kids my age were learning to ride bikes. "They think it's worthless," I told him, letting him in. "They can't understand why she'd leave it to me." Marcus's eyes twinkled, reminding me of Aunt Marie. "Your aunt was many things, but foolish wasn't one of them. Have you found it yet?" "Found what?" He nodded at the key in my hand. "That's not just any key. It opens something special. Something Marie said you'd know what to do with when the time came." I studied the key more carefully. Its head was decorated with a grapevine pattern, the teeth showing signs of age but still sharp. "The wine cellar?" I asked. "But I've been down there hundreds of times." Marcus shook his head. "Not that cellar." For the next hour, we searched the house methodically. Every room, every closet, looking for a lock that might match this mysterious key. Finally, in the study, I noticed something odd about the vintage wine map hanging behind Aunt Marie's desk. Moving it aside revealed a small door set into the wall, its lock green with age. The key fit perfectly. Beyond the door, a narrow staircase descended into darkness. The beam of our flashlights revealed stone walls lined with wine racks, the air cool and perfectly still. But these weren't ordinary wines. "My God," Marcus breathed, examining the nearest bottle. "Do you know what this is?" I lifted my flashlight, reading the label. My hands started shaking. Chateau Lafite Rothschild, 1869. One of the rarest, most valuable wines in existence. And it wasn't alone. The cellar held hundreds of bottles, each one a legendary vintage worth more than most houses. This is impossible, I whispered. These wines, they're worth millions. Keep looking, Marcus urged. There's more. At the far end of the cellar, we found another door. This one opened into a small room that made me gasp. Lining the walls were racks of wine bottles bearing Bella Vista's label, but not from recent years. These were vintages from the vineyard's golden age, when it had produced some of California's most sought-after wines. On a small table sat a leather-bound journal and an envelope with my name. Inside was a letter in Aunt Marie's handwriting. My dearest Isabella, if you're reading this, you found what I spent 20 years protecting. The rare vintages in the outer cellar are valuable, yes, but they're not my true legacy. That lies in the bottles that surround this letter. These are Bella Vista's secret vintages, wines made exactly as my grandfather taught me, using techniques passed down through generations. While the world thought our vineyard had lost its way, I was quietly making small batches of the finest wine we've ever produced. Why the secrecy? Because true winemaking, the kind that produces something transcendent, can't be rushed or commercialized. When your uncle and cousins pushed for higher production and faster turnover, I knew they'd never understand. So I let them think the vineyard was failing while preserving our real treasure. The wider cellar's contents will give you the financial security to run Bella Vista your way. The secret vintages will prove to the world that our winemaking legacy never died. It was just waiting for the right heir. You were always that heir, Isabella. You understand that wine isn't just about business, it's about passion, patience, and respect for tradition. Now it's your turn to carry our legacy forward. All my love, Aunt Mary. P.S. Check the last vintage in the rack to your right. I think you'll find it interesting. With trembling hands, I lifted the bottle she indicated. The label read Bella Vista Private Reserve 2019, Aunt Marie's final vintage before her death. She finished it, Marcus said softly. Her last masterpiece. She knew she wouldn't live to see it released, but she made it anyway. For me, I realized. She made it for me to release when I was ready. The implications of what we found were staggering. The rare vintages alone would make headlines in the wine world. But Aunt Marie's secret wines, they would rewrite Bella Vista's story completely. My phone buzzed. Uncle Marco's number. No doubt calling to make another offer for the worthless vineyard. I let it go to voicemail, my mind already racing with plans. What are you thinking? Marcus asked, recognizing the look in my eye. The same one Aunt Marie used to get when she was plotting something extraordinary. I smiled, picking up her journal. I'm thinking it's time to show the world what Bella Vista can really do. But first, we have some work to do. The next few hours would change everything. But that's another story, one that begins with a single decision. When to reveal the truth that would transform not just my family's legacy, but the entire California wine industry. The next morning, I sat in Aunt Marie's study reviewing her private wine journals. Each page revealed another layer of her brilliant deception, how she maintained two parallel operations at Bella Vista for 20 years. The commercial side produced decent but unremarkable wines, while her secret cellar housed masterpieces crafted using centuries-old techniques. The soil tests came back, Marcus announced, entering with a stack of papers. Just as Marie predicted, the vines aren't depleted at all. They're perfect for producing the kind of complex wines she was making in secret. I smiled, thinking of how my family had misread everything about Bella Vista. She stressed the vines deliberately, didn't she? Forced them to work harder, develop more character. Exactly. While your uncle was complaining about low yields, Marie was creating exactly the conditions she wanted. These test results prove it. Bella Vista has some of the best terroir in California. My phone buzzed again. The 10th call from Uncle Marco since yesterday. This time I answered. Isabella, his voice oozed concern. We're worried about you, alone up there in that old house. Why don't you come down to the city? We can have dinner, discuss a fair price for the vineyard. Actually, Uncle Marco, I'm meeting with Christie's auction house this afternoon. They're very interested in some rare wines I've discovered. Silence on the line. Then, what rare wines? Oh, just a few bottles Aunt Marie left behind, including a Chateau Lafite Rothschild from 1869. Amazing what you find when you look carefully, isn't it? The phone went dead. Within an hour, A convoy of expensive cars was winding up Bella Vista's driveway. "This is private property," I called out as my uncle and cousins spilled from their vehicles. "You weren't invited." "Private property." Uncle Marco's face was red. "This is family property. If there are valuable wines here, they belong to all of us." "Actually," Mr. Patterson's voice cut in as his car pulled up, "everything belongs to Isabella. I thought you might need backup," he added to me with a wink. What followed was the most satisfying hour of my life. We led them to the hidden cellar, watching their expressions change from skepticism to shock to naked greed as they realized what Aunt Marie had concealed. "These wines," Anthony's voice shook. "They're worth millions," I finished. "And that's just the investment cellar. Would you like to see what else Aunt Marie left me?" The secret room with Bella Vista's private vintages hit them even harder. Sophia actually gasped when she read the testing notes that proved these wines could rival the world's best. All this time, Uncle Marco whispered, while we thought she was failing. "She was perfecting her craft," I said. "Away from your constant pressure to sell out, to maximize profits at the expense of quality. She created masterpieces while you were counting dollars." "We can still fix this," he rallied. "As a family, we'll form a new company, market these wines properly." "No," I cut him off. "Aunt Marie left Bella Vista to me because she knew I'd understand what she was trying to preserve. This isn't about money, it's about legacy. You can't just shut us out," Anthony protested. "We're family." "Family?" I laughed. "Yesterday you called this place worthless. Called me incompetent. Now suddenly you want to be partners." Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "I have some additional documents you should see." Marie left very specific instructions about how these wines should be handled. The plan Aunt Marie had laid out was brilliant. The rare vintages in the investment cellar would be auctioned through Christie's, creating a multimillion-dollar endowment to support Bella Vista's true mission. Her private vintages would be released slowly, reestablishing the vineyard's reputation for excellence. More importantly, she documented everything, every technique, every secret that made her wines exceptional. Knowledge meant to be passed down, not sold to the highest bidder. The next few months transformed everything. The auction of the rare wines made international headlines. Hidden wine cellar yields million-dollar vintages. Wine critics flocked to Bella Vista when we released the first of Aunt Marie's private vintages. "Extraordinary," Robert Parker wrote. "A wine that challenges everything we thought we knew about California vintages, 100 points." The publicity revealed the truth about Aunt Marie's supposed decline. She hadn't failed. She'd chosen to step away from commercial success to preserve something more valuable. Each bottle we released proved that Bella Vista's legacy was stronger than ever. My family tried everything to gain control. They filed lawsuits claiming the wines were family property. They appealed to other vintners, trying to turn the industry against me. Nothing worked. Then came the day we released Aunt Marie's final vintage, the 2019 she'd made especially for me. Wine lovers and critics gathered in Bella Vista's courtyard for the first tasting. "This wine," I told them, "represents everything my aunt believed in. That true quality can't be rushed, that some traditions are worth preserving. That excellence speaks for itself." The response was beyond anything we'd imagined. Critics called it a masterpiece, a wine that will be talked about for decades. Orders flooded in from collectors worldwide. Uncle Marco showed up the next day, alone. "I never understood her," he admitted, looking older and somehow diminished. "I saw the declining sales, the lower production, and thought she was failing. I never realized she was choosing a different path." "She tried to tell you," I said. "All those times you pushed her to sell, to modernize, to focus on profits. She was trying to show you that some things are worth more than money. And now? What will you do with her legacy?" I led him to the vineyard, where new vines were being planted using Aunt Marie's methods. "I'm going to honor it. Keep Bella Vista small, focus on quality over quantity. Make wines that matter." "You sound just like her," he said softly. "Thank you." Bella Vista flourished over the next year, but not in the way my family had always pushed for. We produced limited quantities of exceptional wines, focusing on quality and tradition. The waiting list for our bottles grew longer with each release. Sophia eventually came to work at the vineyard, surprised to find she had a talent for understanding wine once she stopped focusing on status and profits. Anthony opened a wine bar in San Francisco, proudly featuring Bella Vista's vintages. Last week, a young winemaker asked my advice after a tasting. Everyone says I need to expand production, focus on commercial success, she said. But I want to make wines that mean something. I showed her Aunt Marie's original wine journals, still kept in her study. Success isn't always measured in cases sold, I told her. Sometimes it's about having the courage to take a harder path, to preserve something valuable even when others don't understand. Marcus joined us, carrying a special bottle, one of the few remaining from Aunt Marie's private collection. Want to know the real secret? He asked, decanting the wine with practiced care. It's not about the wine at all. It's about understanding that some legacies are meant to be preserved, not exploited. The wine was perfect, of course. But more than that, it was a reminder of what Aunt Marie had really left me, not just valuable bottles or secret techniques, but the understanding that true worth isn't always visible on the surface. The vineyard continues to thrive, producing wines that honor both tradition and innovation. Uncle Marcos still visits occasionally, finally learning to appreciate wine for its own sake rather than its profit potential. And me? I've learned that some inheritances are about more than property or possessions. They're about preserving something precious, about having the patience to let quality speak for itself. In Aunt Marie's study, her last note to me is framed on the wall. The finest wines, like the truest legacies, reveal themselves to those who know how to wait. As I write this from the study that was once hers, overlooking vines that grow stronger each year, I think about how different things might have been if she'd given in to pressure, chosen profit over principle. The cellar's secret door remains, though it's not so secret anymore. But its lesson lives on. Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden from those too busy counting profits to understand true worth. After all, the finest vintages, like the best revenge, are best served with patience, clarity, and the quiet confidence that quality will always find its audience. The last time I saw my grandfather alive, he was working in his private lab, surrounded by circuits and prototype boards, his white hair wild as Einstein's. "Alex," he'd said, looking up from his work with those sharp blue eyes that could pierce right through you. "Remember what I always tell you. Innovation isn't about being first," I recited, smiling at our familiar exchange. "It's about being right." And he prompted, setting down his soldering iron. "The most valuable things aren't always visible on the balance sheet." He nodded, satisfied. "Good boy. Now hand me that oscilloscope, would you?" I was 28 then, fresh out of my PhD program in electrical engineering, working as a junior researcher at Quantum Tech, the company my grandfather had built from nothing into a billion-dollar technology empire. Everyone expected me to start at the top, but Grandpa insisted I begin in R&D just like he had 40 years ago. "You need to understand how things work from the ground up," he'd said when I protested. "Your uncle never did, and look how that turned out." Uncle Richard, my father's older brother, was CFO of Quantum Tech, but everyone knew he was just a figurehead. He had the family name but none of the technical brilliance that had made my grandfather successful. Dad might have been better suited for leadership, but he died in a climbing accident when I was 12, leaving me to be raised by my mother and grandfather. I didn't know it then, but that conversation in the lab would be our last. 2 weeks later, Grandpa Arthur Mitchell, founder and CEO of Quantum Tech, was found dead in his office. Heart attack, the doctors said. Natural causes. He was 78. The funeral was exactly as he would have hated it, formal, stuffy, full of corporate types more interested in the future of the company than in mourning its founder. Uncle Richard worked the crowd like a politician, shaking hands and accepting condolences with practiced grace. His wife Amanda hung on his arm, her designer black dress probably worth more than my yearly salary. "Such a tragedy," I overheard her telling someone. "But Richard is ready to step up. The company needs strong leadership now." I stood in the back, uncomfortable in my dark suit, missing the casual conversations Grandpa and I used to have over circuit boards and coffee. My mother squeezed my hand, understanding as always. "He was so proud of you," she whispered. "Never forget that." The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at the corporate headquarters. I arrived early, passing through the familiar security checkpoints, nodding to researchers I knew from the labs. The company's legal team had arranged everything in the main conference room, all sleek glass and chrome, with views of the city skyline that Grandpa had always said reminded him how far he'd come from his garage startup days. Uncle Richard was already there, naturally, seated at the head of the table where Grandpa used to sit. Amanda perched beside him, tapping away on her phone. A few board members filled other seats, along with key executives and legal representatives. "Ah, Alex," Uncle Richard said as I entered, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Good of you to join us. How are things in the research department? Still playing with your little circuits?" Before I could respond, Harrison Webb, the head of legal, called the meeting to order. "We're here for the reading of Arthur Mitchell's last will and testament," he began formally. Mr. Mitchell was very specific about his wishes. I tried to focus on Harrison's words, but my mind kept drifting to my last conversation with Grandpa. There had been something urgent in his manner that day, something he seemed to want to tell me. But we'd been interrupted by an emergency in one of the production facilities, and he'd never finish whatever he was trying to say. And to my grandson, Alexander James Mitchell. My head snapped up at the sound of my name. Uncle Richard had gone very still. "I leave controlling interest in quantum tech, including all voting shares, patents, and associated intellectual property. Additionally, Alex will assume the position of CEO, effective immediately upon the reading of this will." The room erupted in chaos. Uncle Richard's face turned an alarming shade of purple. Amanda's phone clattered to the floor. Board members started whispering furiously among themselves. "This is ridiculous." Uncle Richard slammed his hand on the table. "I'm the CFO. I've been running this company's finances for 20 years, and you're telling me Arthur left everything to this lab rat?" "Richard," Harrison said calmly, "there's more." But Uncle Richard was on his feet now, pacing like a caged animal. "He's not even 30. He has no business experience. He spends all his time tinkering in the basement labs like some overgrown science fair kid. Just like your father did." My mother's quiet voice cut through his tirade. She'd slipped into the room unnoticed during the commotion. "Or have you forgotten how quantum tech started?" "That was different," Richard snapped. "The industry was different. We need real leadership now, not some idealistic researcher who thinks he can follow in Arthur's footsteps." "Mr. Webb," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the shock still reverberating through my system, "you said there was more." Harrison nodded, shuffling his papers. "Yes. There's a letter, to be read only in the presence of Alex and the board members." He glanced meaningfully at Amanda, who remained stubbornly in her seat. "Private board members only," Harrison clarified. Amanda gathered her things and stormed out, shooting me a venomous look as she went. Once the room had cleared except for board members, Harrison opened a sealed envelope. The paper inside was covered in Grandpa's distinctive scrawl, not typed and formal like the will, but handwritten with the urgency I'd sensed in our last conversation. "To the board of directors and my grandson Alex." Harrison read, "If you're hearing this, then I ran out of time to tell you in person. Quantum tech is on the verge of something revolutionary. The work we've been doing in Lab Zero." "Lab Zero?" One of the board members interrupted. "There is no Lab Zero." "Oh, but there is," Harrison continued reading. "Hidden beneath the main research facility. Only Alex and I knew about it. Inside, you'll find the future of quantum computing. A breakthrough that will change everything. But there are people who would kill for this technology, including some very close to home. The lab is secured with biometric locks keyed to Mitchell DNA. Alex, you'll know what to do when you see it. Trust no one until you understand everything. And Richard." Harrison paused, looking uncomfortable. "What?" Uncle Richard demanded. "What did he say about me? I know what you've been planning with global tech. I have proof. Alex checked the safe in my private lab. The password is your father's birthday." The room fell silent. Global Tech was our biggest competitor, a tech giant that had been trying to acquire quantum tech for years. Any dealings with them would be a massive breach of corporate trust. "This is insane," Uncle Richard said, but his voice had lost its anger, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. Arthur was clearly losing his mind at the end. Hidden labs, corporate espionage. He was paranoid. Nevertheless, Harrison said, "These are his legal wishes. Alex is CEO, effective immediately. And given the serious nature of these allegations, I recommend a full audit of all executive communications and financial transactions." Uncle Richard stormed out of the room, nearly bowling over an assistant in his haste. The board members gathered their things, some offering me congratulations, others looking skeptical. Soon only Harrison, my mother, and I remained. Alex, Harrison said quietly, your grandfather added something else, for your eyes only. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper with just one line. The quantum key is in the music box. Be careful who you trust. The music box. I knew exactly which one he meant. A handmade wooden box that had sat on his desk for as long as I could remember. It played our favorite Bach piece, the one he taught me to play on piano when I was young. I need to get to his private lab, I said, standing. Now. But as I would soon discover, I wasn't the only one with that idea. The security logs would later show that Uncle Richard had accessed the lab just minutes after leaving the conference room. What they wouldn't show was what he took, or what he was planning to do with it. My grandfather's private lab was exactly as I remembered it from our last conversation. Organized chaos of circuit boards, testing equipment, and handwritten notes in his distinctive scrawl. Except for one thing, the music box was missing from his desk. Someone's been here, I said, noting the disturbed dust pattern where the box should have been. Recently. Harrison Webb, who had insisted on accompanying me, pulled out his phone. I'll check the security logs. Yes, Richard accessed the lab 12 minutes after leaving the meeting. My heart raced as I approached the wall safe hidden behind a vintage vacuum tube diagram. One of Grandpa's favorite pieces of scientific history. The combination was indeed my father's birthday, 03 to 1772. Inside, I found a thick folder labeled Global Tech and a tablet computer I'd never seen before. The folder contained emails, financial records, and photographs that made my blood run cold. Uncle Richard had been secretly meeting with global tech executives for months, providing them with confidential quantum tech research data. But it was the tablet that held the real bombshell. These are security recordings, Harrison observed as I swiped through the files, from cameras I didn't know existed. The footage showed Uncle Richard in numerous clandestine meetings, not just with global tech executives, but with people I recognized from our own board. He was planning a hostile takeover, one that would have stripped Grandpa of control over his own company. That's why he changed the will, I murmured. Grandpa found out about the conspiracy. But where was the music box? And what was this quantum key Grandpa had mentioned? A commotion outside the lab drew our attention. Through the glass walls, I could see security guards rushing toward the research wing. My phone buzzed with an alert. Unauthorized access attempted in sublevel B. Sublevel B doesn't exist, Harrison said, frowning at his phone. I smiled grimly. Yes, it does. Lab 0. The hidden lab's entrance was exactly where I'd expected, behind a seemingly solid wall in the basement level. Accessible only through a biometric scanner disguised as a circuit breaker panel. As Harrison and I descended the stark white staircase, accompanied by 2 security guards, I could hear voices echoing from below. It has to be here somewhere. Uncle Richard's voice, tight with desperation. Search everything. We emerged into a vast laboratory space that would have made any tech company jealous. Quantum computing arrays lined the walls, their cooling systems humming quietly. In the center of the room stood Uncle Richard, the missing music box in his hands, surrounded by 3 men I recognized from Global Tech's executive team. It's over, Richard, I called out, making them all jump. Step away from the equipment. Alex, he tried to hide the music box behind his back, like a child caught stealing cookies. I can explain. I'm protecting the company's interests. These men are here to steal our quantum computing breakthrough, I interrupted. Just like you've been stealing our other research. One of the global tech executives started edging toward the exit, but the security guards blocked his path. You don't understand, Richard snarled. This company needs real leadership, not some idealistic kid playing scientist. I've spent 20 years making backdoor deals and selling our technology to competitors. I pulled out my phone and played one of the security recordings. Richard's face went pale as his own voice filled the lab, discussing pricing for stolen trade secrets. Where did you get that? Grandpa wasn't as oblivious as you thought. He knew what you were planning. That's why he made sure everything was documented. Richard's expression shifted from shock to calculation. Fine. Let's make a deal. You're young. You don't want the burden of running a company this size. Global Tech is prepared to offer. Put down the music box, I said quietly, Before I show the board what else is on this tablet. His hands tightened on the wooden box. This is nothing but a sentimental trinket. But if you think it's so important, he held it over the edge of a nearby workbench. Maybe we should negotiate. I smiled. Go ahead. Drop it. Something in my tone made him hesitate. What do you mean? The quantum key isn't in the music box, Uncle Richard. That was just Grandpa's way of identifying who we couldn't trust. The real breakthrough. I gestured to the quantum arrays humming around us. It's already integrated into every system in this lab. Has been for months. You're bluffing, one of the global tech executives said. Our sources say the technology isn't operational yet. Your sources, I said, walking over to a terminal, were as reliable as your ethics. I typed in a command and the screens around the lab lit up with a familiar back melody translated into quantum algorithms. Grandpa and I completed the final tests 3 weeks ago. The patent applications were filed the next day. Richard's face contorted with rage. He hurled the music box at my head, but one of the security guards caught it mid-air. Within minutes, the lab was swarming with police and FBI agents. Harrison had quietly called them while I was keeping everyone distracted. You'll regret this, Richard spat as he was led away in handcuffs. You're nothing but a lab rat playing at being CEO. I picked up the music box, miraculously unharmed. No, Uncle Richard. I'm exactly what Grandpa knew I could be. Someone who understands that real innovation isn't about being first, it's about being right. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, press conferences, and corporate restructuring. The evidence against Richard and his conspirators was overwhelming. The board, once they saw the security footage and financial records, voted unanimously to support my leadership. Quantum Tech stock actually rose when the news broke. The market apparently appreciated a CEO who could protect corporate secrets and innovate at the same time. The quantum computing breakthrough, when we officially announced it, exceeded even our most optimistic projections. 1 month after the confrontation in Lab Zero, I sat in what was now my office, the music box restored to its place on the desk. My mother had just left after helping me hang a new piece of art. The vintage vacuum tube diagram that had hidden Grandpa's safe, now framed and mounted where I could see it every day. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Dr. Chen, one of our senior researchers, practically bouncing with excitement. Alex, the quantum network test results, they're even better than we predicted. Your grandfather's theories about quantum entanglement were spot on. I smiled, remembering all those late nights in the lab with Grandpa, discussing theories that seemed impossible then. Show me, I said, following her toward the research wing. As we walked, we passed the wall of CEO portraits. Grandpa's photo was there now, right next to where mine would eventually hang. His eyes seemed to twinkle with that familiar mix of mischief and brilliance. Innovation isn't about being first, I whispered. It's about being right. And somewhere I was sure Grandpa was smiling. In the months that followed, quantum tech flourished under the new direction. We expanded the research division, established a foundation to support young scientists, and created a mentorship program that would have made Grandpa proud. Uncle Richard and his co-conspirators face federal charges for corporate espionage and fraud. The music box still sits on my desk, playing batch whenever I need inspiration. Inside, where Richard never thought to look, is an old photograph of Grandpa and me in his original garage lab. Both of us covered in solder burns and grinning like mad scientists. On the back, in his handwriting, is the real key to everything. The most valuable things aren't always visible on the balance sheet: love, trust, and the courage to do what's right. Never forget where we came from, and never stop looking toward where we're going. Love, Grandpa. Sometimes, late at night when I'm working in Lab Zero, I swear I can feel his presence in the hum of the quantum arrays, in the elegant dance of electrons and algorithms, in the endless possibility of discovery. And I know that while Richard saw only dollar signs and corporate power, Grandpa saw something far more valuable: the future and someone he trusted to guide it. Innovation isn't about being first, it's about being right. And sometimes being right means honoring the past while building the future, one quantum bit at a time. Numbers have always made sense to me in a way people never did. While other kids were reading comic books, I was studying my father's accounting textbooks, fascinated by the elegant dance of debits and credits. By age 12, I could spot errors in tax returns that even seasoned accountants missed. My father called it my superpower. My older brother Marcus just called it weird. There she goes again, buried in spreadsheets. He'd sneer whenever he caught me working on practice problems. Live a little, Emily. Nobody likes a human calculator. But I didn't care. Numbers were honest in a way humans weren't. They didn't play favorites or hide their true intentions behind fake smiles. 2 plus 2 would always equal 4, no matter how much you wished it didn't. That dedication led me to become a forensic accountant, specializing in fraud investigation. While Marcus followed in our father's footsteps, taking over his successful construction company and expanding it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, I built my reputation methodically, one case at a time. My work wasn't flashy, but it was meaningful. I helped small businesses recover stolen funds, exposed embezzlement schemes, and even assisted in bringing down a notorious money laundering operation. Not that any of that mattered to my family. At every gathering, Marcus dominated the conversation with tales of his latest business conquest, while my parents beamed with pride. My work was relegated to footnote status, barely worth mentioning between discussions of Marcus's new contracts and expansion plans. So Emily, my mother would say, her tone carefully neutral, still doing that audit thing. I learned to smile and nod, to accept my role as the less successful sibling. It wasn't worth explaining that I just helped recover millions in stolen pension funds, or that the FBI regularly consulted me on complex financial fraud cases. In their eyes, I would always be the odd one out, the daughter who chose a strange, unglamorous path instead of joining the family business. Everything came to a head at our father's retirement party last spring. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel was packed with business associates, friends, and family, all gathered to celebrate Richard Anderson's 30 years of success. Marcus, as the new CEO, was set to give the main speech. I arrived early, helping Mom with the final arrangements while trying to ignore the way she fussed over Marcus's place at the head table. My own seat was tucked away in a corner, practically hidden behind a large floral arrangement. "Emily, darling," Mom called out, her voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval. "Couldn't you have worn something more festive? This is a celebration, not a day at the office." I glanced down at my charcoal gray pantsuit, chosen specifically because I had to head straight to court after the party for a major testimony. "I have work later, Mom." She sighed, that special sigh reserved for my many disappointments. "Of course you do. Heaven forbid you take one day off to properly celebrate your father's retirement." Before I could respond, Marcus swept in, commanding attention in his perfectly tailored Italian suit. "Mom, the place looks amazing." He kissed her cheek, then turned to me with that familiar smirk. "Hey there, little sister. Still rocking the auditor chick, I see." I forced a smile, reminding myself that this was Dad's day. "Hello, Marcus. Congratulations on the new development deal." "Oh, you heard about that?" His surprise seemed genuine. "Didn't think you kept up with actual business news, being so busy with your, what do you call it? Financial forensics." "Forensic accounting," I corrected, even though I knew he was perfectly aware of my job title. "And yes, I do read the business section occasionally." The party progressed predictably. Dad gave an emotional speech about building the company from nothing. Mom cried appropriately. And then it was Marcus's turn at the microphone. He started well enough, talking about our father's legacy and the future of Anderson Construction. But then 3 glasses of champagne in, he went off script. "You know," he said, swaying slightly, "Dad always taught us that success comes from taking risks, from thinking big. Some people," his eyes found mine in the crowd, "prefer to play it safe, to sit in dark offices counting other people's money, too afraid to get their hands dirty in real business." A murmur went through the crowd. Mom's smile became fixed, while Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Take my sister Emily, for example," Marcus continued, ignoring Dad's warning look. "She could have been part of something great, could have helped grow the family legacy. Instead, she chose to become a glorified accountant, spending her days nitpicking over receipts and bank statements." I sat perfectly still, my face carefully blank as he continued his drunken monologue. "I mean, what's the point? What real value does someone like that add to the world? At least real accountants help businesses grow. But forensic accounting," he laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "That's just a fancy term for professional tattletale. Absolutely useless in the real business world." The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. I could feel pitying glances from nearby tables, could see Mom's mortification and Dad's anger. But I didn't move, didn't react. I learned long ago that showing emotion only gave Marcus more ammunition. Marcus, Dad finally interrupted, his voice stern, that's enough. But Marcus was on a roll. No, Dad, it needs to be said. While I'm out there making real money, building real things, Emily's playing detective with spreadsheets. It's embarrassing. She's leaving. I finished for him, standing up smoothly. I'm leaving. Dad, congratulations again on your retirement. I'm sorry, but I have a court appearance I can't miss. I walked out with my head high, ignoring Mom's pleas to stay and Marcus's drunken calls of "see, can't even take a joke." I had a job to do, testimony to give that would help convict a man who'd stolen millions from his employees' pension fund. My work mattered, whether my family understood that or not. The next 3 months passed in a blur of cases and court appearances. I ignored calls from my parents, deleted Marcus's half-hearted apology text without reading it, and threw myself into my work. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning in September, everything changed. The call came at 7:15 a.m., just as I was settling into my office with my first coffee of the day. Marcus's name flashed on my phone screen, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something, instinct, maybe, or just years of ingrained big sister obligation, made me answer. Emily? His voice was rough, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. I need your help. The company, there's something wrong. Very wrong. I leaned back in my chair, fighting the urge to remind him how useless my skills were supposed to be. What kind of wrong? Numbers aren't adding up. Money missing. Lots of it. Millions maybe. I can't. He took a shaky breath. Please, Em. I know I don't deserve your help, but this isn't just about me. Dad's retirement fund is tied up in the company. If something's happened, I closed my eyes, already knowing I wouldn't refuse. Not with Dad's future at stake. Send me everything you have. Bank statements, transaction records, vendor contracts. Everything from the last 2 years at least. Thank you, he whispered, sounding close to tears. Emily, I cut him off. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Dad. And Marcus, this isn't free. My usual consulting rate is $500 per hour. There was a long pause before he responded. That's fair. More than fair, considering. I'll clear my schedule for the next few days. Have the documents delivered to my office by noon. I hung up before he could say more, already mentally preparing for what promised to be an intense investigation. Little did I know, I was about to uncover something far bigger and more personal than either of us expected. The documents arrived at exactly 11:58 a.m., 14 boxes of financial records, contracts, and internal memos. Marcus always did have a flair for dramatic timing. I cleared my conference room, ordered lunch, and settled in for what I knew would be a long day. By midnight, I had my first suspicions. By the end of the week, I had proof. And what I found made my blood run cold. The fraud wasn't just extensive, it was elegant. Someone had constructed an intricate web of fake vendors, inflated invoices, and ghost employees, all designed to siphon money from the company so smoothly that even an experienced businessman like Marcus hadn't noticed. But what really caught my attention were the timestamps. This scheme hadn't started 3 months ago or even 6 months ago. It had started exactly 1 year before Dad's retirement. I was staring at a particularly suspicious series of transactions when my office door burst open. Marcus stood there, looking like he hadn't slept in days, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled and loose at the collar. Well? He demanded, dropping into the chair across from me. It's been 5 days, Emily. Tell me you found something. I studied my brother's face carefully. I found a lot of things, Marcus. The question is, how much do you really want to know? He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. What's that supposed to mean? I want to know everything. This is my company we're talking about. Dad's company, I corrected quietly, watching his reaction. At least it was until last year. Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Fear? Before he masked it. Fine, Dad's company that he'd entrusted to me. Just tell me what you found. I pulled out my tablet and pulled up a spreadsheet. In the past 18 months, Approximately $4.3 million has been diverted from Anderson Construction through a sophisticated network of shell companies and fraudulent invoices. Marcus went pale. 4.3 million? That's impossible. How did I not see this? Because it was designed not to be seen, I explained, turning the tablet to show him. Look at these vendor names: Summit Development Solutions, Progressive Building Materials, Elite Construction Resources. They all sound legitimate, don't they? All registered as corporations, all with professional websites and business addresses. He nodded slowly. I recognize some of those names. We've been doing business with them since exactly 1 year before Dad's retirement, I finished. Interesting timing, don't you think? Marcus shifted in his chair. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything yet. I'm stating facts. Fact 1. These companies exist only on paper. Their business addresses are vacant lots or non-existent buildings. Fact 2. All payments to these companies are processed through a complex chain of bank accounts before ultimately ending up in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I pulled up another document. Fact 3. The authorization for these vendors came from the CEO's office. Your office, Marcus. He jumped up, face flushed. Now wait just a minute. Are you accusing me of stealing from my own company? No, I said calmly. I'm telling you that someone with high-level access to Anderson Construction has been systematically draining it dry. Someone who knew exactly when Dad was planning to retire. Someone who had the authority to approve new vendors without question. Marcus collapsed back into his chair. This is insane. I wouldn't. There's more, I continued, pulling out a thick stack of papers. Remember Jennifer Chen? His face went blank. Who? Your chief financial officer. The one you hired right after Dad announced his retirement plans. The one whose references were impeccable, whose credentials were stellar, and who, as it turns out, doesn't actually exist. What? Jennifer Chen is a ghost, Marcus. Her credentials are forgeries, her references lead to burner phones, and her social security number belongs to a woman who died in 1984. But she had full access to the company's finances, didn't she? Could approve vendors, process payments, move money between accounts. Marcus was shaking now, his face ashen. Stop. Please, just stop. I need to explain. I sat back, folding my hands on the desk. Yes, I think you do. What followed was a confession that broke my heart, not just for the company or for Dad, but for my brother himself. It started small, he whispered, staring at his hands. Just a few thousand here and there. The company was doing well, and I had debts. Gambling debts. I told myself I'd pay it back before anyone noticed. But the debts got bigger, I guessed. He nodded miserably. I met Jennifer. Her real name is Rebecca Walsh, at a casino in Vegas. She said she could help me set up a system to divert funds, just until I got back on my feet. But then she started blackmailing me, threatening to expose everything if I didn't let her take more. And he let her, I said, my voice hard. You let her steal from Dad's company, from his retirement fund, to cover up your own crimes. Tears were running down his face now. I didn't know what else to do. If this got out, it would kill Dad. The shame, the scandal. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a recording. Jennifer/Rebecca's voice filled the room, discussing payment schedules with Marcus. His head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. You recorded our meetings? No, I said quietly. The FBI did. They've been watching Rebecca Walsh for months. She's pulled this same scam on 3 other companies. I've been working with them on the investigation since you called me. Marcus lurched to his feet. You set me up. Your own brother. I protected the company. I corrected him. I protected Dad. The FBI is willing to treat you as a victim of extortion rather than a co-conspirator, thanks to these recordings. Rebecca and her associates will go to prison. The money in the Cayman accounts has already been frozen and will be returned to Anderson Construction. And me, he whispered. You'll have to step down as CEO, obviously. There will be fines, probably some community service, but no jail time as long as you cooperate fully. I stood up, gathering my files. Oh, and one more thing. You'll be paying back every penny you took, with interest. I've already drawn up a repayment schedule. It's quite aggressive, but then again, my rates are quite reasonable for a useless forensic accountant. The meeting with our parents the next day was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Mom cried, Dad raged, and Marcus sat there looking like a scolded schoolboy as I laid out the evidence and the resolution. But when I finished explaining how I'd worked with the FBI to save both the company and Marcus from complete destruction, Dad did something he'd never done before. He stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me tight. My brilliant girl, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I am so proud of you. That was 6 months ago. Anderson Construction is back on solid ground now, with Dad temporarily out of retirement to help right the ship while Marcus gets the help he needs for his gambling addiction. Mom still occasionally sighs about the scandal, but even she has started bragging to her friends about her daughter, the financial crime fighter. As for Marcus, he's different now. Humbled, certainly, but also more genuine. Last week, he stopped by my office with coffee and an actual heartfelt apology. I was jealous, he admitted, staring into his cup. You always made everything look so easy, so clean. Numbers, patterns, problems, you just saw them differently. I wanted to be that sure of myself, that confident in my abilities. Instead, I tried to tear you down to make myself feel bigger. I accepted his coffee and his apology, but not his self-pity. You're good at plenty of things, Marcus. Running crews, managing projects, inspiring people to do their best work. Those are real skills. You just got lost somewhere along the way. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I did, but he found me. Guess being a professional tattletale has its uses after all. I threw a pencil at him, and for the first time in years, we both laughed, really laughed, together. Yesterday, Dad called to ask if I consider taking on a permanent role at Anderson Construction, heading up a new compliance and audit department. We need your eyes, he said, your way of seeing things. It's time this became a true family business with all our strengths working together. I haven't given him an answer yet. Part of me loves my independence, my reputation as a solo practitioner. But another part remembers that little girl with her father's accounting books, dreaming of working alongside her family. Maybe it's time for a new chapter. After all, numbers may not lie, but sometimes they do tell us when it's time for a change. In the end, that's the thing about family, like a complex equation. It may take time to work out all the variables, but when you finally get it right, everything balances perfectly. Sometimes it just takes a forensic accountant to show everyone exactly how the numbers should add up. Money can't buy happiness, but it can certainly buy revenge, especially when your toxic family doesn't know you're worth $500 million. I learned that lesson the hard way last month when my own sister and parents tried to destroy my career, not realizing they were actually attacking the company's owner. I'm Jennifer Zhang, though most people know me as Jen. On paper, I'm the newly appointed Chief Operations Officer of Palmer Technologies, a mid-sized software company in Austin. What my family doesn't know is that 3 months ago, I became the majority shareholder through a series of quiet acquisitions using a holding company. The story of how we got here starts 15 years ago, when I was a scholarship student at MIT while my younger sister Angela attended UCLA on our parents' dime. Angela needs the support, Mom would say. You've always been so independent, Jen. Independent wasn't the word for it. I worked 3 jobs to cover expenses, coded freelance projects until my eyes burned, and lived on ramen while Angela posted Instagram stories from Cabo's spring break. But I had a plan. Technology was my passion, and I knew the sacrifices would pay off. They did, spectacularly. By 27, I'd founded and sold 2 successful startups, though I kept that information quiet. On paper, I looked like a moderately successful tech executive. In reality, I had hundreds of millions carefully invested through various shells and holding companies. Why the secrecy? Because I'd watched money destroy too many families. I saw how my parents' blatant favoritism toward Angela had intensified when they thought I was struggling financially. Their pride in her modest success as a marketing manager was matched only by their condescension toward my risky tech career. You should let Angela help you find a stable corporate job, Mom would suggest during family dinners. She has such good connections. I let them believe what they wanted. Let them think I needed their approval, their connections, their validation. Meanwhile, I was building something bigger than they could imagine. 3 months ago, I orchestrated my masterpiece, the quiet acquisition of Palmer Technologies, where I've been working as a VP for the past year. The company was undervalued but had incredible potential. Using a maze of holding companies and investment vehicles, I purchased a controlling interest without anyone realizing the true buyer's identity. The board appointed me COO as part of the transition, not realizing they were actually hiring their new owner. I took the role because I genuinely loved the company and wanted to help lead its transformation from the inside. Angela's reaction to my promotion was predictable. "Must be nice to finally catch a break," she said during our monthly family dinner. "Though I hope you're not in over your head. Corporate leadership is very different from just writing code." Mom and Dad exchanged concerned looks. "Maybe Angela could mentor you," Mom suggested. "She's been in corporate management for years." I bit back a laugh, thinking about the acquisition documents sitting in my safe. "I'll keep that in mind." But Angela wasn't content with condescension. My promotion had disrupted her carefully maintained narrative of superiority. She'd always been the successful one, the daughter with the prestigious corporate career, while I was just the nerdy coder who couldn't climb the ladder. The first sign of trouble came when Angela began showing up at Palmer Technologies for lunch with mid-level managers, casually gathering information about my role and responsibilities. I watched through my office window as she charmed her way through the departments, playing the concerned sister worried about my ability to handle such a big job. Then came the anonymous emails to HR, suggesting I had faked my credentials. Those were easily disproven, but the intent was clear. Someone was trying to undermine me. "I'm just looking out for you," Angela said sweetly when I confronted her. "Everyone knows tech companies promote women too quickly these days because of diversity quotas. I'd hate to see you fail publicly." I let her play her games, curious to see how far she would go. The answer came yesterday in the form of a thick envelope delivered to the board of directors. Inside was a meticulously crafted dossier of evidence suggesting I had been embezzling company funds, falsifying reports, and engaging in insider trading. Bank statements had been expertly doctored, emails cleverly fabricated, all pointing to massive fraud orchestrated by the new COO. The board called an emergency meeting for Friday morning. Angela must have learned about it through her network of lunch companions, because last night she could barely contain her glee. "The board wants me there tomorrow," she announced at dinner, eyes glittering. "Apparently there's going to be a major leadership change. Mom, Dad, you should come too. For moral support." They agreed eagerly, though neither bothered to ask why I wasn't invited to this meeting about my home job. What my family doesn't know is that I spent the night in my home office, preparing my own dossier. Every lunch meeting Angela had conducted with my employees, every piece of personal information she had gathered under false pretenses, every manipulative email she had sent trying to gather dirt, all of it meticulously documented. More importantly, I finally prepared the documents revealing Palmer Technologies' true ownership structure. Tomorrow morning, my family will learn exactly who they've been trying to destroy. I should be angry. I should be hurt that my own sister would try to ruin my career, that my parents would happily attend my professional execution. But sitting here in my home office, surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, I feel oddly calm. You see, Angela's scheming has given me something invaluable. A perfect opportunity to address not just her sabotage, but decades of family dysfunction. Sometimes the most effective lessons come from letting people believe they've won, right up until the moment they realize they've lost everything. The board meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m. My family will be there expecting to watch my downfall. Instead, they're about to learn why you should never underestimate the quiet one who was just a coder. The stage is set, the players are in position, and for once, I'm looking forward to a board meeting. I arrived at the Palmer Technologies office early Friday morning, wanting to observe my family's grand entrance. Right on schedule, they swept into the lobby at 8:45 a.m. Angela in her power suit, Mom and Dad dressed for what they assumed would be their successful daughter's triumph over their failing one. "Is the board ready for us?" Angela asked the receptionist, practically vibrating with anticipation. Her smile reminded me of when we were kids, and she'd secretly broken my science fair project the night before judging. I watched through my office window as they were escorted to the main conference room. Board members filed in shortly after, looking appropriately grave. Everyone had received my instruction email about playing along with the initial proceedings. At precisely 9 a.m., I wheeled my chair back from my desk and headed for the conference room. Time to start the show. Marcus Chen, our board chairman, was mid-sentence when I entered. "These allegations against Ms. Zhang are extremely serious." "Sorry I'm late. I announced cheerfully, taking my usual seat. Angela's head snapped up, her perfect smile faltering. Jen, this is a closed board meeting. You weren't invited, she hissed, shooting panicked looks at the board members. I smiled serenely. Actually, I invited myself. You see, it's somewhat difficult to have a board meeting without the owner of the company. The silence that followed was absolutely perfect. Angela's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mom's carefully styled hair seemed to deflate along with her smug expression. Dad's face turned an interesting shade of purple. What are you talking about? Angela finally managed. Palmer Technologies is owned by shareholders. It's a public company. Correction, I said, nodding to my assistant who began distributing folders to everyone present. Palmer Technologies was a public company until 3 months ago, when it was purchased by Zhang Innovations Holdings. Would you like to guess who owns that? I watched realization dawn on the board members' faces as they reviewed the documents. Many of them had wondered about the recent buyout but hadn't known the identity of their new owner. This is ridiculous, Angela sputtered. You can't afford? You're just a coder? I finished for her. Yes, you've mentioned that. Repeatedly, along with many other things actually. Sharon, could you play the recordings please? My assistant activated the conference room's audio system. Angela's voice filled the room. Look, between us, my sister's not qualified for this position. I'm worried she'll embarrass the company. Have you noticed any unusual transactions in her department? Recording after recording played. Every lunch meeting, every manipulative conversation, every attempt to gather dirt on me. Angela sank lower in her chair as her careful scheme unraveled. And then there's this, I continued, holding up the envelope she'd sent to the board. Falsified evidence of financial crimes, forged documents, attempted corporate sabotage. Tell me, Angela, did you really think no one would verify these allegations before acting on them? I was trying to protect the company, she burst out. You're not qualified for this role. You've never been the successful one, the smart one. I'm the one who deserves to be exposed for corporate espionage. I finished quietly, to be reported to the SEC for attempting to manipulate stock prices with false allegations. To lose your own job when your employer learns about your actions. The blood drained from her face. Mom finally found her voice. Surely you wouldn't do that to your own sister. Like she wouldn't try to destroy my career? I turned to face my parents. Like you wouldn't come here to watch it happen. We were just supporting Angela. Dad protested weakly. She said you were in trouble. No, I cut him off. You were doing what you've always done. Assuming Angela knows best, that she has my interests at heart, that her success somehow makes her more worthy of support and respect. I stood up, addressing the board. I apologize for the theatrical nature of this meeting, but I needed everyone to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Ms. Zhang, Angela, has committed several serious crimes in her attempt to sabotage my position here. Her actions have exposed this company to potential legal and regulatory risks. Marcus Chen cleared his throat. What would you like us to do, Ms. Zhang? I sat back down, folding my hands on the table. First, I want it on record that the board has reviewed and dismissed all allegations against me as categorically false. Second, I want a formal letter sent to Angela's employer detailing her actions, including the recordings and falsified documents. Her attempts at corporate espionage should be part of her professional record. You can't, Angela shrieked. You'll destroy my career. Like you tried to destroy mine? I asked mildly. The difference is, these are real documents showing real actions you actually took, not fabricated evidence designed to frame an innocent person. I turned back to the board. I also want it noted that Angela Zhang and our parents are permanently banned from Palmer Technologies property. Any attempt to contact our employees or interfere with company business will result in immediate legal action. Jen, please. Mom was crying now, her mascara running. We're family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family supports each other. Family celebrates success instead of trying to destroy it. Family doesn't forge documents to get someone fired because their ego can't handle someone else's achievements. I pulled out one final document, a copy of my first company's acquisition agreement from 5 years ago. Do you want to know the real irony? I've been more successful than Angela for years. I sold my first company for $50 million when I was 27. My second sold for $180 million 2 years later. I could have bought that country club membership you wanted so badly, Dad. Could have funded those luxury vacations you were always taking Angela on, Mom. They stared at the document, at the numbers that shattered their carefully maintained family mythology. But I wanted to succeed on my own terms, I continued. I wanted to build something meaningful, not just buy status. I kept my wealth quiet because I wanted to see who would support me when they thought I was struggling. You failed that test spectacularly. Angela had started crying. But they weren't her usual manipulative tears. She looked truly broken, perhaps for the first time in her life. You're firing me from my job, she whispered. No, I replied. I'm letting your own actions fire you, the same way you tried to do to me. The difference is you actually did what you're being accused of. I stood up again, gathering my papers. The board meeting is adjourned. Marcus, please ensure all the documentation is properly filed. Mom, Dad, Angela, security will escort you out. Wait. Angela called as I reached the door. Please, I'm sorry, I was jealous. I couldn't stand that you were finally doing better than me. We can fix this, can't we? We're still family. I turned back one last time. You know what the difference is between us, Angela. When you thought I was struggling, you tried to knock me down further. When I succeeded, I kept it quiet to avoid making you feel inferior. That's the difference between real success and whatever game you've been playing. The next few weeks were interesting. Angela did lose her job when her employer learned of her corporate espionage attempt. Mom and Dad's friends at the country club suddenly developed a new respect for their other daughter when the truth about my success leaked out. I received multiple tearful voicemails, written apologies, even a letter from Angela's therapist saying she was doing the work to understand her toxic behavior. I archived them all without responding. 3 months later, I was working late when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. It was Angela, looking very different from the polished corporate climber who tried to destroy me. She'd lost weight, cut her hair short, and wore simple business casual attire instead of her usual designer suits. I'm not staying, she said quickly, holding up a hand when I started to speak. I need to say something. She placed a thick envelope on my desk. This is every password, every contact, every piece of information I gathered while trying to sabotage you. I'm also sending a formal apology to the board and my former employer, taking full responsibility for my actions. I studied her carefully. Why now? Because you were right, she said quietly, about everything. I've spent my whole life playing a role, the successful daughter, the corporate star. I tried to destroy you because you achieved real success, on your own terms. It terrified me because it showed how hollow my life was. She turned to leave, then paused. I'm starting over. Small company, entry-level position, earning things for real this time. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you taught me more by letting me fail than our parents ever did by helping me succeed. I waited until she reached the door. Angela? She turned back, hope flickering across her face. Send me your resume in a year, I said. Not for a leadership role. But if you're serious about earning things properly, well, we're always looking for people willing to work their way up. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she nodded briskly and left without another word. 6 months later, Palmer Technologies has grown beyond even my ambitious projections. We're developing groundbreaking software, creating jobs, and building something meaningful. Mom and Dad still send occasional messages, usually when they need something or want to show off to their friends. I maintain polite but distant contact, no longer seeking the approval I once desperately wanted. The corner office they thought I didn't deserve has a perfect view of the Austin skyline. Sometimes in the evening, I watch the sunset and think about success, family, and the price of being underestimated. Angela sent me a Christmas card last week. No manipulative message, no asking for help. Just a simple note. You succeeded not because of our family's support, but despite its absence. I'm finally learning to do the same. Maybe that's the real revenge, not destroying those who hurt us, but building something so magnificent that their attempts to tear us down become footnotes in our success story. The quiet one. The coder. The sister they underestimated. Turns out I was the successful one all along. They just couldn't see it until it was too late. I never thought I'd have to fight for my childhood home at the age of 28. But here I was sitting in the lawyer's office, watching my stepmother Miranda smugly flip through the latest when my father had signed just 2 weeks before his death. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until 6 months ago, I had what most people would consider a charmed life. I ran a successful small bakery in downtown Boston, lived in a cozy apartment overlooking the harbor, and had a close relationship with my father, despite the tension that had existed since he married Miranda 3 years ago. Dad had always been my rock, especially after Mom died of cancer when I was 12. For 10 years, it was just the two of us in our beautiful Victorian home in Beacon Hill. He threw himself into raising me alone, never missing a school event or dance recital. When I started showing interest in baking, he converted part of our kitchen into a practice space where I could experiment with recipes. Follow your passion, he'd always say, but make sure you have a solid plan. That's exactly what I did. After culinary school, I worked in several high-end bakeries before opening my own place. Dad was my biggest supporter, both emotionally and financially. He helped me secure the loan for my bakery, using our family home as collateral. This house has been in our family for 4 generations, he told me. It should help build the 5th generation's dreams too. Everything changed when Miranda came into our lives. She was 15 years younger than Dad, with perfectly manicured nails and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. They met at a charity gala where she was working as an event coordinator. Within 6 months, they were married. I tried to be happy for them, really tried. Dad deserved love after spending so many years alone. But something about Miranda set off warning bells. Maybe it was the way she casually mentioned how outdated the house was and how they should sell it. Or how she'd make subtle digs about my career choice, always with that plastered-on smile. A bakery is such a quaint business, she'd say during family dinners. But don't you think you should aim higher, Sarah? Your father's position in the financial world could open so many doors. Dad would usually change the subject during these moments. He hated conflict, always had. But I noticed how he started becoming more distant, our weekly dinners becoming monthly, then barely at all. When I did see him, he looked tired, worried. I should have pushed harder to find out what was wrong. The diagnosis came like a thunderbolt on a clear day. Pancreatic cancer, already stage 4. 3 months at most, the doctors said. Dad handled it with the same quiet dignity he approached everything in life. But Miranda changed almost overnight. Gone was the subtle manipulation, replaced by open hostility whenever Dad wasn't in the room. I'd come to visit and find her whispering to him, stopping abruptly when I entered. Documents would quickly be shuffled out of sight. But most worrying were the new people suddenly always around. Lawyers I'd never seen before, financial advisors who weren't from Dad's firm. Just getting our affairs in order, Miranda would say sweetly when I asked about them. Your father wants to make sure everything is taken care of. I should have fought harder then, should have demanded answers. But how do you fight when your father is dying? How do you risk making his last days filled with conflict? 2 days before Dad passed away, I finally managed to get a moment alone with him. He was so weak by then, the cancer having ravaged his once strong frame. Sarah, he whispered, gripping my hand with surprising strength, the blue box. Remember the blue box. Before I could ask what he meant, Miranda swooped back into the room, a nurse in tow. Darling, it's time for your medication. Sarah, I think it's best if you go now. Too much excitement isn't good for him. That was the last time I spoke to my father. He slipped into a coma that night and was gone by morning. I didn't even get to say goodbye. The day of the will reading, Miranda arrived at the lawyer's office dressed in head-to-toe designer black, playing the grieving widow to perfection. Her 2 adult children from a previous marriage flanked her like honor guards. Justin and Ashley, both around my age, both eyeing me with barely concealed contempt. Mr. Patterson, Dad's longtime lawyer, looked uncomfortable as he prepared to read the will. I'd known him since childhood. He'd helped Dad set up my college fund, handled the paperwork for my bakery loan. The fact that he wouldn't meet my eyes sent a chill down my spine. This last will and testament, he began, his voice carefully neutral, was signed by Thomas Mitchell 2 weeks before his death. Witnessed by Gerald Conway and Philip Reeves. I didn't recognize either name, but Miranda's slight smile told me she did. As Mr. Patterson read through the document, I felt the floor dropping out from under me. The house, Dad's investment portfolio, even his majority stake in my bakery. Everything was left to Miranda. I was to receive a small monthly allowance, to be managed by my loving wife as she sees fit. No, I whispered, this isn't right. Dad would never. Oh, but he did, Miranda cut in smoothly. Your father realized that you needed guidance, structure. He was very concerned about your ability to manage such significant assets. That's a lie. I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. Dad helped me build my business. He believed in me. He was clearly not thinking clearly near the end. Miranda finished, her voice dripping with false sympathy. The cancer medications, they can affect judgment. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. There is one other matter. Mr. Mitchell's safety deposit box at First National Bank. He left specific instructions that it should be opened only after the will reading in the presence of all parties. Something flickered across Miranda's face. Uncertainty? Fear? But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Well then, she said, rising gracefully, shall we proceed to the bank? As we walked out of the office, Miranda fell into step beside me. I've been thinking, she said quietly, so only I could hear. That old house really is too big for just me. I'll probably sell it. Unless, of course, you'd like to rent it. At market rate, naturally. I stopped walking, my hands clenching into fists. That house has been in my family for generations. Her smile was pure poison. Not anymore, dear. Not anymore. The drive to the bank was silent, heavy with unspoken tensions. I kept thinking about Dad's last words to me. The blue box. Remember the blue box. What had he been trying to tell me? First National Bank was a grand old building in downtown Boston, all marble columns and brass fixtures. The bank manager led us down to the safety deposit box room, his keys jingling with each step. Mr. Patterson followed, carrying a thin folder. Box 2317, the manager announced, inserting his key. Mr. Patterson used a second key, and the box slid out smoothly. Inside was a single blue metal box, about the size of a shoebox, with a simple combination lock. My heart started racing. This was what Dad had been trying to tell me about. Well, Miranda demanded. Open it. Mr. Patterson shook his head. According to Mr. Mitchell's instructions, only Sarah knows the combination. All eyes turned to me. Miranda's confident smile wavered slightly. I stared at the lock, my mind racing. What would Dad have used? What number would he expect me to remember? Then it hit me. The date we opened my bakery. The day Dad said his investment in my dreams had paid off. With trembling fingers, I turned the dials. 0 to 41 to 7. The lock clicked open. Inside the box, neatly organized, were several envelopes and a USB drive. But what caught everyone's attention was the small voice recorder sitting right on top, with a post-it note in Dad's handwriting. Play me first. I picked up the recorder with shaking hands and pressed play. Dad's voice, weak but clear, filled the small room. My dearest Sarah, if you're hearing this, then things have happened exactly as I feared they would. Dad's voice, though weakened by illness, carried the sharp intelligence I remembered from my childhood. If you're listening to this recording, it means Miranda has done exactly what I suspected she would. Convinced me to sign a new will in my final days. I heard Miranda's sharp intake of breath beside me as Dad continued. What she doesn't know is that I've been documenting everything since the day she first suggested I update my will. The USB drive in this box contains video recordings from hidden cameras in my home office, showing Miranda and her lawyer discussing their plans while they thought I was sedated. You'll also find copies of emails between them, discussing how to manipulate me when the medications made me confused. Miranda lunged for the box, but Mr. Patterson smoothly stepped between us. Please continue playing the recording, Sarah. There's more, Dad's voice went on. In the green envelope, you'll find the real will I signed and had notarized 2 months ago, when I was still clear-headed. Mr. Patterson has the original in his office safe. In the blue envelope is documentation of every cent Miranda has embezzled from my accounts over the past year, including transfers to offshore accounts in her children's names. This is ridiculous, Miranda sputtered, her composure finally cracking. He was delusional at the end. Everyone knows that. But Dad had anticipated this too. I know Miranda will claim I was confused or delusional. That's why the yellow envelope contains sworn statements from my doctors, confirming that I was mentally competent until the final week of my life. The new will she forced me to sign is dated 2 weeks before my death, but hospital records show I was already on heavy sedation by then. The bank manager, who had been watching silently, spoke up. Should I call security, Mr. Patterson? Yes, the lawyer replied calmly. And the police? I believe they'll be very interested in this evidence. Miranda's face had gone from white to mottled red. You can't prove anything. It's all lies from a dying old man, who was a legendary financial investigator known for exposing fraud. I cut in, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Who taught me everything he knew about following money trails and spotting cons? That dad. Justin and Ashley, who had been edging toward the door, found their escape blocked by two burly security guards. Mr. Patterson was already pulling documents from the box, his expression grim as he scanned their contents. The real will, he announced, holding up a thick document, leaves the house and the majority of the estate to Sarah, with reasonable provisions for Miranda's comfort during her lifetime, provided she had not attempted to alter the inheritance, which, given recent events, are now null and void. Dad's voice crackled from the recorder again. Sarah, sweetheart, I'm so sorry for the pain this must be causing you. I wanted to tell you everything, but I needed Miranda to believe she had one. You always said I watched too many spy movies. His weak chuckle turned into a cough. The house is yours, as it should be. The bakery is yours. Everything I worked for is yours. And Miranda. We all turned to look at her as Dad's voice hardened. Miranda, if you're hearing this, remember what I told you the day we met. That the most dangerous mistake a con artist can make is underestimating their mark. Consider this your final lesson. The next hour passed in a blur of police statements and formal accusations. Miranda, Justin, and Ashley were led away in handcuffs, charged with fraud, coercion, and attempted theft. I sat in a comfortable chair provided by the bank manager, clutching the blue box that contained my father's last gift to me. Not just the inheritance, but the proof of his trust and love. Mr. Patterson sat beside me, his familiar presence comforting. Your father came to me 2 months ago, he explained softly. He discovered Miranda's attempts to access his accounts, found evidence of her past cons. Instead of confronting her, he decided to play along, gather evidence. He said you taught him that, about keeping detailed records. I laughed through my tears. When I was setting up the bakery, I made him help me create spreadsheets for everything. He always said I was better at documentation than he was. He was so proud of you, Sarah. Every time you achieved something new with the bakery, he'd come into my office just to brag about his amazing daughter. The aftermath of Miranda's arrest played out over the following months. The evidence Dad had gathered was overwhelming, not just of her attempt to steal his estate, but of similar cons she pulled in other states. She and her children had targeted wealthy, terminally ill men before, but never anyone as thorough as my father. The day I moved back into our family home was bittersweet. Every room held memories. Dad teaching me to dance in the living room, our epic baking fails in the kitchen, the countless nights we'd spent in his study as he taught me about business and finance. I found one last surprise in his study, a letter tucked inside his favorite first edition Sherlock Holmes book. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind he used for special occasions. My dearest Sarah, it began, if you're reading this, then our plan worked. I know it must have hurt, watching Miranda try to take everything we built together. But you taught me something important with your bakery, that sometimes you have to be patient, let things develop properly, like a good sourdough starter. I laughed out loud at the baking reference. Classic Dad. I'm leaving you more than just the house and the business, Sarah. I'm leaving you the knowledge that you're stronger than anyone who tries to deceive you, smarter than those who underestimate you, just like your mother was. The letter went on, sharing memories, dreams, and one final surprise. He'd already paid off my bakery loan in full. Consider it my last investment in your dreams, he wrote. 6 months after Miranda's arrest, my bakery was thriving. I'd expanded into the space next door, adding a cafe section where people could sit and enjoy their pastries. The walls were decorated with photos of Dad and me throughout the years, and one special picture, Mom and Dad on their wedding day, standing in front of our Victorian home. Every morning, as I unlock the bakery's front door, I think about everything Dad taught me. About business, yes. But more importantly about love, trust, and the power of playing the long game when fighting injustice. Miranda and her children eventually took plea deals, avoiding longer sentences in exchange for returning all the money they'd stolen from their previous victims. I testified at the sentencing, not for revenge, but to ensure the judge understood the pattern of their crimes. They didn't just steal money, I told the court. They tried to steal the legacy of love between parents and children. They tried to corrupt the trust that makes families strong. The Victorian house is full of life again now. I host weekly dinner parties for friends, baking my way through Mom's old recipe box that Dad had carefully preserved. Sometimes Mr. Patterson joins us, sharing stories about Dad that make me laugh and cry in equal measure. Last week, while cleaning out an old closet, I found Dad's collection of spy novels. Tucked inside one was a bookmark with his favorite quote, "The best revenge is living well." Below it, in his neat handwriting, he added, "And having better evidence." I keep that bookmark in my office at the bakery now, a reminder that love doesn't just give us strength, it gives us wisdom, patience, and sometimes the perfect recipe for justice. They say you can't choose your family, but that's not entirely true. Every day, we choose how to honor the family we've lost, how to protect what they built, and how to carry their legacy forward. Dad chose to protect me one last time, using the very skills I had learned from him. And I choose to remember him not just through photographs or inheritance, but through every loaf of bread I bake, every business lesson I share, and every moment I spend in the home he fought so cleverly to preserve for me. As for Miranda's designer clothes and expensive jewelry, they were auctioned off to help repay her victims. I kept only one thing, the fake Cartier watch she always wore. It sits in my office drawer, a reminder that some things in life, like some people, aren't what they appear to be. But others, like my father's love and trust in me, are more genuine than any diamond. Every evening, as I close up the bakery and walk home to our beautiful Victorian house, I think about Dad's final lessons, about patience, preparation, and the power of believing in yourself. Sometimes I swear I can hear him chuckling, saying, "Follow your passion, but make sure you have a solid plan." I did, Dad. I did. When your stepdaughter tells you she's dying, the last thing you expect is to be caught in an elaborate lie. But that's exactly what happened to me last spring, and it cost me more than just money. It shattered my faith in family and forced me to question everything I thought I knew about love and trust. I'm Catherine Walsh, 52, married to Tom for the past 15 years. His daughter Ashley was 12 when we first met, and I'd spent years trying to be the perfect stepmother, supportive but not pushy, loving but respectful of boundaries. Now at 27, Ashley had grown into a beautiful young woman with her father's charm and her late mother's delicate features. The day everything changed, I was in my home office reviewing client files for my real estate business when Ashley called, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Can you come to the hospital?" she managed between sobs. "Please don't tell Dad yet. I need you." I'd never heard her sound so vulnerable. Despite our generally good relationship, Ashley usually went to her father first with any problems. This was different. An hour later, I sat in a sterile consultation room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, holding Ashley's trembling hands as she told me the news that would set everything in motion. "It's stage 4 pancreatic cancer," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They're giving me 6 months, maybe less." My world tilted on its axis. Ashley was young, healthy, had her whole life ahead of her. She'd just gotten engaged to James, her boyfriend of 2 years, and they were planning a small wedding for next year. "Oh, sweetheart," I pulled her into my arms, my own tears falling now. "We'll get other opinions, the best doctors, experimental treatments, whatever it takes." She shook her head against my shoulder. "I don't want to spend my last months in hospitals. I want to marry James. I want one perfect day before." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Of course," I said immediately. "We'll move the wedding up. Whatever you need." But I want it to be special. Ashley looked up at me, her green eyes swimming with tears. "The wedding I've always dreamed of. At the Peninsula Hotel, with the crystal ballroom and the garden terrace." "I know it's expensive. Don't worry about the money," I heard myself say. "I'll take care of everything." The Peninsula Hotel was one of Chicago's most exclusive venues with a 2-year waiting list for weddings. But I had connections through my real estate work, and money could make things happen quickly. I'd have to sell my vacation home in Michigan, the one thing I'd kept from my life before Tom. But what was a house compared to giving my dying stepdaughter her dream wedding? Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. The way Ashley insisted on keeping her diagnosis secret from everyone except James and me. How she didn't want her father involved in the wedding planning. The convenient excuse that she didn't want him to worry to see him suffer through another loss after her mother's death from breast cancer 15 years ago. But grief and panic have a way of blinding you to things you might otherwise question. I threw myself into planning the perfect wedding, pulling every string I had to make it happen in just 6 weeks. The Peninsula's events manager was an old client who owed me a favor. The florist was a friend who agreed to work overtime. The designer boutique that had Ashley's dream dress made alterations their top priority after I explained the situation. Money flowed out of my accounts like water. The venue deposit alone was $50,000. The dress was another $15,000. Flowers, catering, music, decorations. Every time I turned around, there was another bill to pay. "Are you sure about this?" Tom asked one night as I reviewed the catering contract. "It seems like an awful lot for a wedding that's being planned so quickly." "She deserves it," I said firmly, not meeting his eyes. I hated lying to my husband, but I'd promised Ashley I wouldn't tell him about her diagnosis yet, and the Michigan house has been sitting empty anyway. It's time to let it go. The house sold quickly, the market was hot, and I priced it to move. The proceeds covered most of the wedding expenses, though I still had to dip into my retirement savings for the rest. Ashley threw herself into wedding planning with an enthusiasm that sometimes seemed at odds with her supposed condition. There were no visible symptoms of her illness, but I told myself that was the blessing of youth and good genes, that she was putting on a brave face. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was at Ashley and James' apartment, dropping off some samples for the table settings. They weren't home, but I had a key for emergencies. I was leaving the samples on their dining table when I knocked over Ashley's purse. As I picked up the scattered contents, a medical report fell out of a folder. My heart stopped as I read the letterhead. It was from Northwestern Memorial, dated just a few days ago. But it wasn't a cancer diagnosis. It was a pregnancy test. Positive. 12 weeks along. My hands shook as I read further. No mention of cancer. No terminal diagnosis. Just a routine prenatal checkup report showing a healthy mother and a healthy baby. The front door opened before I could process what I was seeing. Ashley walked in, stopped dead when she saw me holding the report. "I can explain," she said quickly, but her face told me everything I needed to know. There was no cancer. There never had been. I sank into a chair, the report crumpling in my grip. "Why?" was all I could manage to say. Ashley's face crumpled, but I couldn't tell if the tears were genuine or just another performance. "James's parents are super religious," she said, her voice small. "They would never accept a pregnant bride. We needed the wedding to happen quickly, before I started showing. And we couldn't afford the kind of wedding they'd expect from their only son." The room spun as the magnitude of her deception hit me. I'd sold my beloved lake house, the last connection to my late parents, the place where I'd spent every summer of my childhood. I drained my retirement account, all for a lie. "Does James know?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He had to be part of it. No one could fake that level of concerned devotion I'd seen from him these past weeks. Ashley nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "It was his idea to say it was cancer. He knew about your lake house, knew you'd do anything if he thought I was dying." The calculation in those words made me physically ill. They targeted my deepest fears, my love for my stepdaughter, my memories of her mother's death, all to fund their perfect wedding. But the worst was yet to come, because what Ashley said next would reveal an even darker side to their deception, one that would shake our family to its very core. "You don't understand," Ashley said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "James isn't just worried about his parents finding out about the baby. He needs this wedding to happen now because of the inheritance." I stared at her, still clutching the medical report. "What inheritance?" "His grandfather's trust fund. James stands to inherit $5 million. But there's a catch. He has to be married in a socially appropriate manner before he turns 30. That means a big wedding, at a prestigious venue, with all the right people attending. If he doesn't meet the requirements, the money goes to his cousin instead." The pieces started falling into place. "And when does he turn 30? "Next month," Ashley whispered, right after the wedding. My mind raced back through everything I knew about James. The prestigious law firm job he just left to start his own practice. The expensive clothes and watches he somehow afforded on a starter lawyer's salary. The way he'd encourage Ashley to dream bigger for the wedding, knowing I would pay for it all. "So this was never about the baby," I said slowly. "You used my love for you, Made me think you were dying. Also, James could get his hands on his trust fund. Ashley's face hardened slightly. We're going to pay you back with interest. As soon as James gets the inheritance. Do you hear yourself? I cut her off. You fake having cancer, Ashley. Cancer. Do you have any idea how many families would give everything they have for their loved ones to not have that diagnosis? How many people are actually fighting for their lives right now? She had the grace to look ashamed, but only briefly. What's done is done. The wedding's in 2 weeks. Everything's paid for. You can't back out now. Watch me. I stood up, gathering the scattered contents of her purse. I'm telling your father everything. If you do that, Ashley's voice turned cold. I'll tell him about the affair. I froze. What affair? The one you're having with Michael Bennett, Dad's best friend. I saw you having lunch with him last month at the Four Seasons. Very cozy. I almost laughed. Michael Bennett is my real estate attorney. We were discussing the sale of my lake house. The one I sold to pay for your fake dream wedding. I have the billing records to prove it. But Dad doesn't know that, Ashley countered. And Michael's wife just left him. How do you think it would look? The secret meetings, the large bank transfers, the emotional distraction you've been showing lately. I sat back down, suddenly understanding the full scope of her manipulation. She'd planned this, created a backup story to keep me quiet if I ever discovered the truth. When did you become this person? I asked quietly. What happened to the sweet girl who used to help me bake cookies for the homeless shelter? Who cried when she found injured birds in the garden? Something flickered in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or just annoyance at being confronted with who she used to be. But before she could respond, we heard keys in the door again. James was home. He took in the scene, me with the medical report, Ashley's defensive posture, and his handsome face went blank. Not surprised, not angry. Just calculated. I see we're having a family discussion, he said smoothly, setting down his briefcase. Perhaps we should all talk this through calmly. There's nothing to discuss, I said, standing up again. The wedding's off. I'm calling the vendors tomorrow. James's smile didn't waver. That would be unwise, Catherine. You see, Ashley isn't the only one who's been watching and gathering information. He walked to his briefcase, pulled out a folder. Your real estate license is up for renewal next month. It would be a shame if the board received evidence of certain irregularities in your recent transactions. What irregularities? The lake house sale, for instance, sold well below market value, with some very creative accounting to avoid certain taxes. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation, but investigations can be so time-consuming and damaging to one's reputation. My blood ran cold. He'd been planning this too, documenting everything I'd done to quickly sell my house and fund their wedding. Actions that, taken out of context and twisted the right way, could indeed look suspicious. You're blackmailing me, I said flatly. We prefer to think of it as protecting everyone's interests, James replied. The wedding happens as planned. 2 weeks later, I receive my inheritance. We then buy you a new lake house. Larger, better location. Everyone wins. I looked between them, my stepdaughter and her fiancé, both watching me with a mixture of threat and false sympathy. In that moment, I saw them clearly for the first time. They were perfect for each other, but not in the way I'd originally thought. Okay, I said quietly. You win. The wedding goes forward. They both relaxed slightly, James's smile turning triumphant. I knew you'd see reason. But, I held up my hand, I have one condition. We tell your parents everything, James. Tonight. All of it. The baby, the trust fund requirements, everything. If they still want this wedding to happen, fine. But no more lies. Absolutely not, James snapped, his smooth facade cracking. My parents are coming to dinner at my house tonight. I finished for him. Ashley told me yesterday they'd accepted the invitation, so either you tell them or I will. They tried to argue, to threaten, to negotiate, but I stood firm. Either the truth came out on their terms or on mine. That night, over a dinner I could barely eat, James and Ashley confessed everything to his shocked parents. The pregnancy, the trust fund manipulation, the fake cancer diagnosis. What happened next surprised us all. James's father, a stern federal judge I'd only met twice, listened to the whole story in silence. Then he started to laugh. Did you really think we didn't know about the pregnancy? He asked his son. Your mother volunteers at that hospital. She saw Ashley's name on the patient list weeks ago. James went pale. But the trust fund requirements were meant to ensure you married someone you truly loved in a way that honored our family's values, his mother said quietly. Not to force you into an elaborate deception that hurt everyone around you. The money was never real, his father continued. The trust fund exists, yes, but the marriage clause was something I made up when I saw how materialistic you were becoming. I wanted to see what you would do, if you would choose love and honesty, or if you would scheme your way to what you wanted. The silence that followed was deafening. James looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Ashley was crying, but this time I thought the tears might actually be real. The wedding is canceled, I said into the silence. I'm calling everyone tomorrow. No one argued. The next few weeks were a blur of cancellations, refunds, and difficult conversations. I told Tom everything, showing him the evidence of Ashley's deception. He was devastated, not just by her lies, but by how calculated and cruel she'd been. Some vendors took pity on us and refunded their deposits. Others kept them, understandably. I lost about 60% of what I'd spent, including the lake house. But somehow, that didn't hurt as much as losing my faith in the daughter I thought I'd raised. Ashley and James broke up 2 months later. Without the prospect of millions, their perfect partnership crumbled. She moved back home, humbled and genuinely remorseful for the first time. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said one night, finding me in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. But I want you to know that losing your respect hurts more than losing the wedding, the money, even James. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was 6 months pregnant now, showing clearly, her face stripped of the manipulative confidence she'd worn like armor. You know what the saddest part is? I said finally. If you just told me the truth from the beginning, about the baby, about wanting a nice wedding before you started showing, I would have helped. Not with selling my house, maybe, but I would have found a way, because that's what family does. I know that now, she whispered. I got caught up in James's dreams, his plans. I forgot who I was, who you raised me to be. Slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild. Ashley had her baby, a girl she named Catherine, after me. It was a peace offering, a promise to do better, to be better. I never did get the lake house back, but last summer, Ashley found a small cottage for rent on the same lake, just a few miles from my old place. She used her savings to rent it for a month, invited me to spend time there with her and the baby. It's not the same, I know, she said as we sat on the deck, watching the sunset over the water. But maybe we can make new memories here. Better ones, built on truth this time. I looked at my granddaughter, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, and felt something heal inside me. Not everything, some broken trust can never be fully repaired, but enough to move forward, to find a new kind of relationship with my stepdaughter. People often ask me if I regret not exposing Ashley and James more publicly, not making them face bigger consequences for their deception. But the truth is, they are facing consequences. James lost not just his inheritance but his family's respect. Ashley lost her dream wedding, her perfect fiancé, and had to rebuild her life as a single mother. And me? I lost a house but gained wisdom. I learned that sometimes the people we love most can hurt us deepest, but that doesn't mean we stop loving them. We just love them differently, more carefully, with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries. Last week, I received a letter from James's mother. Inside was a check for half of what I'd spent on the wedding. This doesn't make it right, she wrote, but it's a start. Thank you for having the courage to tell us the truth. You saved not just your family, but ours too. I haven't decided if I'll cash the check yet. Part of me wants to use it as a down payment on a new lake house. But another part thinks maybe it's better to let go of the past entirely, to build something new instead of trying to recreate what was lost. After all, that's what real love does. It builds new things from the ashes of what was broken, hoping that what rises will be stronger, truer, and more authentic than what came before. I'm getting married. My sister Melissa's voice echoed through the phone, high-pitched with excitement. I clutched my coffee mug tighter, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Josh proposed last night at Le Cirque. It was perfect. Down on one knee, champagne, the whole works. Mom's already talking about booking the plaza for next spring. Of course she was. Our mother had been planning Melissa's eventual wedding since she was in kindergarten. The fact that Josh Parker was the groom was just icing on the carefully selected, astronomically expensive cake. Josh Parker, my ex-boyfriend. The man I dated for 2 years in college before he mysteriously broke things off, only to start dating my sister 3 months later. I'm so happy for you both, I lied, watching my reflection in the kitchen window. At 32, I still got carded at bars and mistaken for a college student. Melissa called it my curse. Being the pretty sister while she was the smart one. As if you couldn't be both. So about the wedding, Melissa continued, her tone shifting slightly. I've been thinking about the bridal party. Here it comes, I thought. I just don't think it would be appropriate for you to be a bridesmaid, Sophie. Even though I'd expected it, the words still stung. Oh? It's just, you know how you are. How you affect things. Every time we go anywhere together, all eyes are on you. I can't have that at my wedding. This is my day. I thought about pointing out that I'd never tried to steal her spotlight, that I dressed conservatively, wore minimal makeup, and generally did everything possible to fade into the background at family events. But what was the point? This narrative had been set in stone since we were children. I understand, I said quietly. Don't be dramatic, Sophie. You can still come to the wedding, of course. Just not as part of the bridal party. And maybe wear something muted. Navy or brown would be good. I made non-committal noises until she hung up, then sat at my kitchen counter, staring at nothing. My cat, Oscar, jumped up and head-butted my arm, demanding attention. At least you love me regardless of how I look, I murmured, scratching behind his ears. The next few months were a blur of wedding preparations that I watched from the sidelines. Mom called daily with updates, mostly to tell me what I shouldn't wear or do at the ceremony. No bright colors, she insisted. And maybe you could cut your hair. Something less attention-grabbing. I looked at my perfectly normal shoulder-length brown hair in the mirror and wondered, not for the first time, if my entire family was slightly insane. The real bombshell dropped 6 weeks before the wedding. I was grading papers. I taught English at the local high school when my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. You need to see this. Your sister isn't who you think she is. Attached were screenshots of text messages between Melissa and Josh, recent ones, very explicit ones. The problem? They were from 2 years ago, when Josh was still dating me. My hands shook as I scrolled through message after message. The timestamps didn't lie. While I was planning our future together, Josh had been sleeping with my sister. Their relationship hadn't started after we broke up. It had been the reason we broke up. More texts followed from the anonymous number, pictures of them together at a hotel, date stamp receipts, email exchanges. Someone had compiled a thorough record of their betrayal. Who is this? I typed back. Josh's ex before you. Found all this while cleaning out old hard drives. Thought you deserved to know. I sat there for a long time, Oscar purring in my lap, looking at the evidence of my sister's betrayal. Not just the affair, but the years of lies that followed. The family dinners where they'd played the perfect couple while I nursed my broken heart. The sympathetic looks from relatives who thought I just couldn't keep a man while my brilliant sister had landed him. The next day, I got a call from my mother. Sophie, darling, about the wedding. Melissa's having second thoughts about inviting you at all. I clutched the phone tighter. What? Well, she's worried you might make a scene. You've been acting strange lately, distant. And you know how you can get emotional. I thought about the screenshots sitting in my phone. About years of being gaslit and marginalized by my own family. About the perfect wedding being planned for my sister and the man she'd stolen from me. Don't worry, Mom, I said calmly. I promise I won't do anything to ruin Melissa's perfect day. I spent the next few weeks quietly preparing. I didn't protest when the wedding invitation was rescinded. Didn't argue when Melissa told mutual friends I was too jealous of her happiness to attend. I just smiled and focused on my work and adopted another cat, a beautiful white Persian I named Lady. But every night, after my students' papers were graded and my cats were fed, I worked on my plan. I had evidence of a years-long deception. The question was, what would hurt more, revealing it before the wedding and stopping the ceremony, or waiting until after they'd said their vows? The answer came 3 days before the wedding, at what should have been the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't invited, of course, but the screenshots from that evening found their way to my phone anyway. Melissa, radiant in a designer dress, toasting her perfect love story. Josh, handsome in his tuxedo, describing how he'd known she was the one from the moment they met, conveniently leaving out that he'd been dating her sister at the time. And then the final straw, my mother's speech about how Melissa and Josh were meant to be and how wonderful it was that they found each other at the right time. I looked at my cats, curled up together on my couch, then at the stack of evidence on my coffee table. "What do you think?" I asked them, "before or after?" Oscar yawned. Lady blinked her blue eyes lazily. I picked up my phone and started making calls. If I was going to crash a wedding, I was going to do it right. 2 days before the ceremony, I visited my favorite salon. Not for a dowdy haircut as my mother had suggested, but for subtle highlights that made my brown hair shimmer gold in the light. I booked a spa day, had my nails done, and went shopping. The dress I chose wasn't navy or brown. It was a deep, rich burgundy that made my skin glow and my green eyes pop. Not white. I wasn't that tacky, but absolutely guaranteed to draw attention. "You can't avoid photographs in this," the boutique owner warned me. I smiled, thinking of the photos and screenshots carefully organized on my iPad. That's rather the point. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. I took extra care with my appearance, elegant makeup that enhanced rather than concealed, hair styled in soft waves. The burgundy dress fitting perfectly. My hands should have been shaking as I drove to the plaza. My heart should have been racing as I walked through the lobby. Instead, I felt oddly calm. Years of being the family scapegoat, the pretty face without a brain, the emotional one who couldn't be trusted not to make a scene. It all led to this moment. I checked my reflection one last time in a gilded mirror. Ready or not, I whispered to myself, "Here comes the truth." The security guard at the ballroom door started to stop me. My name had been removed from the guest list. But then my mother's personal assistant spotted me. "Sophie." Janet's eyes widened at my appearance. "You're not supposed to be." "I know," I said smoothly, "but I have something important to contribute to the ceremony. You might want to find a good seat." She started to protest, but I was already moving past her into the ballroom. Heads turned as I walked down the aisle, whispers following in my wake. I caught a glimpse of my mother's horrified face, of Josh's sudden pallor, of Melissa's fury as she spotted me from the bridal preparation room door. I took a seat in the front row, directly opposite where my parents would sit, and waited. The truth, like my burgundy dress, was about to make quite an entrance. Part 2. The wedding planner tried to approach me twice, no doubt to ask me to leave, but something in my calm demeanor seemed to unsettle her. My mother was frantically whispering with my father near the entrance, shooting worried glances in my direction. I smiled serenely and opened my clutch, checking that my iPad was ready. The string quartet began playing right on schedule. Guests settled into their seats, the excited murmur of conversation filling the ornate ballroom. I could hear snippets of whispered speculation about my presence, about my dress, about what drama might unfold. Josh appeared at the altar, handsome in his tuxedo but noticeably pale. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw the flash of fear cross his face. He knew me well enough to know I wouldn't be here without a reason. The bridesmaids processed in wearing the pale pink dresses Melissa had chosen. I recognized most of them, college friends, cousins, and our youngest sister Amy, who'd been deemed plain enough to be included in the bridal party. Amy caught my eye as she passed, giving me a slight nod. She at least had always seen through Melissa's manipulations. Then the music changed to the bridal march and everyone stood. Melissa appeared in the doorway on our father's arm, resplendent in a custom Vera wine gown that probably cost more than my yearly salary. She looked beautiful, I had to admit, right up until she spotted me and her face contorted with barely concealed rage. I remained seated as she passed, earning more whispers from the crowd. Let them whisper. They'd be doing much more than that soon enough. The ceremony began traditionally enough. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, about honesty and trust. Each word seemed to hang in the air like an accusation. When he reached the familiar "speak now or forever hold your peace" line, I saw my mother tense, probably expecting me to jump up with some emotional outburst. But I waited. This wasn't the moment. Melissa and Josh exchanged their vows. Beautiful, heartfelt promises of faithfulness and devotion that made me want to laugh at the irony. They exchanged rings. They were pronounced husband and wife. It was only after their first kiss as a married couple, as they turned to face their guests with triumphant smiles, that I stood up. "I'd like to offer my congratulations," I said clearly, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. And I have a special presentation for the happy couple. Before anyone could stop me, I pulled out my iPad and connected it to the ballroom's professional AV system. Courtesy of a very helpful tech I befriended during my preparation, the giant screens meant for displaying wedding photos flickered to life. "Sophie, don't you dare," Melissa started, but it was too late. The first screenshot appeared. A text conversation between her and Josh from exactly 3 years ago. The timestamp was clearly visible. "Josh, miss you already. Last night was amazing, Melissa. We have to be careful. Sophie suspects something. Josh, I'll break up with her soon. Just need to find the right moment. Melissa, make it believable. We can't start dating too quickly after." The crowd gasped. I clicked to the next image. Photos of them together at a hotel, dated 2 weeks before Josh broke up with me. Then email exchanges. Hotel receipts. A 2-year trail of deception laid bare. Since the bride and groom chose to rewrite their love story, I said into the shocked silence, I thought everyone should know the original version. How they really found each other, while Josh was still dating me. Chaos erupted. Melissa was screaming something about security, but her voice was drowned out by the reactions of their guests. Josh's parents, who had never quite warmed to Melissa, were on their feet demanding explanations. My mother had collapsed into her chair, while my father stood frozen, staring at the evidence of his favorite daughter's betrayal. "You crazy bitch," Melissa shrieked, starting toward me with her bouquet raised like a weapon. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous." "Jealous?" I laughed, and the sound carried clearly through the stunned ballroom. "Of what? Your affair with my boyfriend. Your need to lie and manipulate to get what you want. The way you've made our entire family complicit in your deception." "It wasn't like that," Josh tried to interject, but I turned to him with a cold smile. "No. Should we show everyone the messages where you told me you needed space to find yourself, while you were actually finding your way into my sister's bed? Or maybe the ones where you two laughed about how stupid I was for not figuring it out sooner?" More screenshots appeared on the screens. The truth in black and white, impossible to deny or explain away. I spent years being told I'm too pretty, too emotional, too much of a threat to Melissa's happiness. I continued, addressing the shocked guests. "I've been excluded from family events, asked to make myself less noticeable, even uninvited from this wedding, all to protect her ego. Meanwhile, she and Josh have been living a lie, making me the fool in a perfect love story." Amy had moved to stand beside me, her bridesmaid's bouquet discarded. "It's all true," she added quietly. "I caught them once before Sophie found out. Melissa threatened to ruin my college applications if I told anyone." The wedding planner was frantically trying to restore order, but it was too late. The perfect facade had cracked, and the ugly truth was spilling out for everyone to see. Our mother finally found her voice. "Sophie, how could you? This was your sister's special day. How could I?" I turned to her, feeling years of suppressed anger rising. "How could you, Mom? You knew, didn't you? About the affair, about all of it. That's why you've spent years trying to minimize me, to make me less of a threat. It was never about me being too pretty. It was about protecting your perfect daughter's perfect lie." Her silence was all the confirmation the guests needed. Melissa had stopped screaming and was now crying dramatically, her expensive makeup running down her face. Josh stood awkwardly beside her, looking like he wanted to disappear. Their perfect wedding had transformed into a public exposure of their true characters, and there was no going back. I gathered my things calmly, enjoying the irony that I was the most composed person in the room. "I'll leave you to enjoy your reception," I said sweetly. "I'm sure you have a lot to discuss. Oh, and Josh, the next time you decide to cheat on someone, you might want to delete your evidence more carefully." As I walked out of the ballroom, head held high in my attention-grabbing burgundy dress, I heard the chaos escalate behind me. Accusations, explanations, recriminations, the soundtrack of a carefully constructed lie finally falling apart. Amy caught up with me at the elevator. "That was magnificent," she said, grinning as she kicked off her bridesmaid shoes. "Want to get a drink? I thought you'd never ask." We ended up at a small bar a few blocks from the plaza, still in our wedding finery, sharing a bottle of champagne and years of pent-up stories about Melissa's manipulations. Emmy had seen through it all but had been too young and powerless to do anything about it. Now, at 25, she was finally free to speak her truth too. "What happened with the wedding gift you bought them?" she asked, signaling for another bottle. I smiled. I donated it to a domestic violence shelter. Seemed more appropriate than letting them enjoy it. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Melissa and Josh still got married. They could hardly back out after the very public exposure, but their perfect dream wedding was forever tainted by the truth. Many guests left before the reception, including Josh's parents, who were overheard saying they'd always known something wasn't right about how their son and Melissa got together. My mother didn't speak to me for 6 months, though I couldn't say I missed her attempts to dim my light. My father, surprisingly, reached out after a few weeks. We met for coffee, and he apologized for years of enabling Melissa's behavior. I always knew you were strong, he said, stirring his coffee absently. But I never realized how strong until today. I'm sorry we made you feel like that was something to be ashamed of. Melissa and Josh moved to Boston shortly after the wedding, unable to face the whispers and changed perceptions in our social circle. Last I heard, she was pregnant with their first child and still telling anyone who would listen that I made everything up out of jealousy. But the screenshots don't lie, and several wedding guests had recorded my presentation. The truth has a way of living on, especially in the digital age. Emmy moved in with me temporarily after the wedding, finally breaking free from our mother's manipulative influence. We'd adopted a third cat, a scrappy rescue we named Truth, and started building the kind of honest, supportive relationship sisters should have. As for me, I'm still teaching English, still getting carded at bars, and still refusing to dim my light for anyone. My students sometimes ask why I smile when they're reading The Picture of Dorian Gray or studying themes of appearance versus reality in literature. If they only knew. Last week, I received an invitation to my cousin Kate's wedding. The note attached read, "Please wear whatever you want, the brighter the better." Some of us have learned from Melissa's mistake. I'm thinking of wearing red. I never planned to keep my success a secret, but when you grow up with parents like mine, you learn that sometimes silence is your greatest weapon. My name is Sarah Chin, and this is the story of how I built a $900 million company while my family thought I was failing. The garden table at my parents' weekly family dinner felt smaller than usual that Friday evening. Maybe it was the weight of the news I knew was about to break, or maybe it was just the suffocating disappointment that seemed to radiate from my mother's perfectly pressed silk blouse. "Sarah, darling," Mom began, delicately cutting into her salmon. "I ran into Janet Wong at the club yesterday. Her daughter Jessica just made junior partner at Goldman Sachs." She paused, letting the achievement hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "Wasn't she in your class at Harvard?" I took a slow sip of water, already knowing where this was heading. "Yes, Mom, we had several classes together." "Such a smart girl," Dad chimed in, not looking up from his phone. "Following the proper path. Unlike some people who throw away perfectly good careers to play entrepreneur in their garage. 3 years ago, their words would have cut deep, but tonight, they barely touched me." I checked my watch, 7:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the Wall Street Journal article went live. "Speaking of my garage startup," I said, pulling out one of my business cards and sliding it across the table. "I brought you a new card. We rebranded last month." Dad picked it up between his thumb and forefinger like it might be contaminated. "Chin Innovations," he read with a smirk. "Very original, Sarah. What happened to that cute little name you had before? Something about butterflies?" "Chrysalis Tech," I corrected him. "We outgrew it." Mom put down her fork, concern etched across her perfectly maintained features. "Sweetheart, I think it's time we had a serious discussion about your future. You're 32 now. All your cousins are established in their careers, starting families." "I have a career, Mom. Playing with computers in your garage is not a career." Dad's voice rose as he slapped my business card down. "We didn't spend a fortune on your education so you could waste your life on this hobby." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same one I felt 3 years ago when I quit my prestigious consulting job to start my company. Back then, their disapproval had nearly crushed me. Now it just served as fuel. "Do you even make any money?" Mom pressed. "When was the last time you took a real vacation or bought new clothes? That blouse you're wearing, I swear I saw it at last year's Christmas dinner." I touched the simple blue silk blouse, one of my favorites, actually, and smiled. "I do all right, Mom." "All right," Dad scoffed. "Your brother James just closed a $50 million deal at his firm. That's doing all right. You're playing pretend CEO with a bunch of computer nerds. 7:55 p.m. 5 minutes to go. The thing about my parents is that they've always measured success in very specific ways. Prestigious job titles, designer labels, luxury cars, and country club memberships. When I graduated from Harvard Business School, they had my life planned out perfectly. Join a top consulting firm, check. Climb the corporate ladder, started. Marry a suitable man from our social circle, pending, and live the life they'd worked so hard to provide. Instead, I discovered something they couldn't understand, a vision. It happened during a routine consulting project. I was helping a major bank upgrade their cybersecurity systems when I noticed a fundamental flaw in how financial institutions handled digital transactions. There was a gap, small but significant, that no one else seemed to see, a way to make digital banking not just secure, but virtually unhackable. The idea consumed me. I spent months researching, developing, testing. When I finally understood what I had, I tried to explain it to my firm's partners. They patted me on the head, metaphorically, and told me to focus on my assigned projects. So I quit. The day I told my parents I was leaving my 6-figure consulting job to start a cybersecurity company, you'd have thought I'd announced I was joining a cult. Mom cried. Dad yelled. My brother James, the golden child, tried to have me committed for a mental health evaluation. At least tell me you're still meeting with that nice Richard Wong, Mom said now, bringing me back to the present. His investment firm is doing very well, and he comes from such a good family. I checked my phone. 7:59 p.m. Actually, Mom, Richard's firm tried to invest in my company last year. Really? Dad's head snapped up. What happened? I turned them down. Their valuation was too low. Mom threw up her hands. Of course you did. Heaven forbid you take advice from successful people who know what they're doing. 8:00 p.m. Right on cue, 3 phones chimed simultaneously, mine, Dad's, and James's, who had been uncharacteristically quiet all evening. Breaking news alerts from the Wall Street Journal. What the Dad's voice trailed off as he read the headline. His face, normally tanned from weekend golf sessions, went pale. Mom looked between us. Robert, what is it? James let out a low whistle as he read his phone. Holy shit, Sarah. With trembling fingers, Dad read the headline aloud. Tech startup Chen Innovations reveals revolutionary banking security protocol. Major banks bid war drives valuation to $900 million. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. You see, while my parents thought I was failing, playing entrepreneur in my garage, I've been building something revolutionary. Those computer nerds they dismissed, world-class engineers and cryptographers who believed in my vision. That garage, a secure development facility with more computing power than most universities. And today, after 3 years of work, dozens of patents, and successful pilot programs with 3 major banks, we were finally going public with what we built. 900 million? Mom stammered, reaching for Dad's phone. There must be some mistake. No mistake, I said quietly, taking another sip of water. The valuation is actually low. We turned down a $1 billion offer from Goldman last week. They wanted too much control. Dad's hand shook as he poured himself more wine, spilling some on the pristine tablecloth. Mom didn't even notice, too busy scrolling through the article, her eyes growing wider with each paragraph. The article doesn't even tell the whole story. I continued, warming to my subject. Would you like to know how many banks are currently bidding for our technology? Or how many government agencies have requested meetings? Or maybe you'd be interested in knowing that Richard Wong's firm is now offering 20 times what they offered last year. James let out another whistle. Sis, why didn't you tell me? I could have helped with the legal side. The same way you helped by suggesting I needed psychiatric help when I started the company? He had the grace to look ashamed. Mom finally found her voice. But your clothes, your car, you live in that tiny apartment. I smiled, thinking about the real estate agent who was quietly finding me a new home. Did it ever occur to you that I might have different priorities than designer labels and luxury cars? That success isn't always visible on the surface. All this time, Dad muttered, still staring at his phone. All those dinners where you mocked my choices, belittled my dreams, treated me like a failure. I kept my voice calm, but I could feel years of frustration bubbling up. Yes, Dad, all this time. The garden fell silent again, broken only by the gentle splash of the fountain Mom had imported from Italy. In that moment, I saw my parents clearly, perhaps for the first time. They weren't the all-knowing arbiters of success I'd once thought them to be. They were just people trapped in their own narrow view of what achievement should look like. My phone buzzed again. Another news alert, another article about Chen Innovations. Soon the calls would start. Investors, journalists, potential clients. Our quiet phase was over, and everything was about to change. I stood up, smoothing down my old silk blouse. I should go. It's going to be a busy few days. Sarah, wait, Mom called out as I reached for my bag. We should celebrate. I'll call the club, arrange a party. Actually, I'm hosting a company celebration next week. Nothing fancy, just a dinner for my team. The brilliant computer nerds who helped build this company. You're welcome to come if you'd like to meet them. I walked to my car, my practical 3-year-old Toyota, leaving them at the table, still shell-shocked. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror. Dad still staring at his phone, Mom dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, James shaking his head in disbelief. Part 2. The Truth Behind Success. The next morning, my office was barely recognizable. Gone was the peaceful space where I built my company. In its place, a whirlwind of activity filled every corner. PR teams huddled around conference tables, investors waited in the lobby, and my phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Sarah, Goldman's on line 3, my assistant Rachel called out as I navigated through the chaos. And your mother's called 6 times. I paused. Of course she had. Take messages for both. My garage startup occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated warehouse in the city's tech district. Not that my parents had ever visited to know this. The garage they imagined was actually 30,000 square feet of state-of-the-art research and development space. The computer nerds were a team of over 100 brilliant engineers, cryptographers, and security experts from around the world. Team meeting in 5, I announced, heading to our main conference room. As I walked, I caught my reflection in a window, still wearing yesterday's old silk blouse. Mom would be horrified. The thought made me smile. The conference room filled quickly. These faces, some tired from working through the night, others excited by our public revelation, were the real story behind Chen Innovations' success. People who believed in the vision when it was just sketches on a whiteboard. First, I began, looking around the room. Thank you all for your extraordinary work. The security protocols we've developed together will change how the world handles digital transactions. You should be proud. Dr. Patel, our lead cryptographer, raised his hand. What about the acquisition offers? Ah, the billion-dollar question. Literally. As of this morning, we've received offers from 6 major banks and 3 tech giants. I paused, letting that sink in. But we're not selling. The room erupted in cheers. They understood what I'd known from the beginning. Our technology was too important to be controlled by any single institution. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. Darling, the club is free next Saturday for your celebration. I've already spoken to the event planner. I put the phone away. She still didn't get it. Later that afternoon, as I finally caught a moment alone in my office, my mind wandered back to how this all started. Not the moment I discovered the security flaw. That was just the spark. The real beginning was a conversation I had with my grandmother before she passed away. I was still at my consulting job, miserable but too afraid to leave. Grandma Chen, unlike her son, my father, had built something from nothing. She'd arrived in America with $10 and a dream, eventually building a successful import-export business. Sarah, she'd said, holding my hand in her hospital room. There are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who build their dreams and those who live in the dreams others built for them. Your father, he chose the second path. But you, my girl, you have the builder's spark in your eyes. She passed away 2 weeks later. I quit my job the next day. The early days were brutal. I emptied my savings, sold my designer wardrobe, much to Mom's horror, and moved into a tiny apartment to fund initial development. My first team members worked for equity because I couldn't afford salaries. We really did start in a garage, my landlord's, actually, which we rented for extra workspace. Dad's words from those days still echoed. You're throwing your life away on a fantasy. But we weren't. Every sleepless night, Every failed test, every ramen dinner brought us closer to something revolutionary. Our security protocol didn't just patch the vulnerability I'd discovered, it completely reimagined how digital systems could protect themselves. A knock at my office door broke through my memories. James stood there, looking uncomfortable in his $1,000 suit. The receptionist almost didn't let me up, he said, attempting a joke. Quite a change from your garage. I gestured for him to sit. What brings you here, James? Mom's crying, Dad's drinking, and I? He trailed off, looking around my office. I owe you an apology. That mental health evaluation thing. I was wrong. Yes, you were. He fidgeted with his tie. Look, my firm would love to handle your legal work. With all these offers coming in. Stop. I held up my hand. That's not an apology. That's an attempt to profit from my success. His face reddened. Sarah, be reasonable. We're family. Funny, that didn't matter when you all thought I was failing. Another knock saved him from responding. Rachel poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but the team needs you. We're seeing some unusual patterns in the test deployment. I stood up. I have to go. Real work to do. Sarah, James called as I reached the door. How did you know? How did you know it would work when everyone said you were crazy? I thought about Grandma Chen. About those early days in the actual garage, about the moment our first prototype succeeded. I didn't know, I answered honestly. I just knew I had to try. That's the difference between builders and dreamers, to James. Builders don't need certainty. They just need courage. Leaving him in my office, I headed to the R&D floor where my team was gathered around a bank of monitors. This was my real family, the ones who believed, who built, who sacrificed. Dr. Patel waved me over. Look at this pattern in the neural network. It's evolving faster than our projections. As I lost myself in the technical discussion, my phone buzzed one last time. A text from Mom. Darling, please. Let us make this right. We're having a small dinner party tomorrow. Just a few close friends who'd love to hear about your success. I turned off the phone. They still didn't understand. This wasn't about them anymore. It never really was. That evening, as the office finally quieted, I stood at the window looking out over the city. 3 years ago, I'd walked away from everything my parents valued. Prestige, security, status. In their eyes, I'd chosen certain failure. But standing there, watching the sunset reflect off neighboring buildings, I realized something important. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. My practical Toyota still sat in the parking lot, now surrounded by news vans. The old silk blouse hung comfortably on my shoulders. Tomorrow, I face more investors, more journalists, more family drama. But tonight in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. My phone lay silent on my desk, but I knew what was happening across town. Mom would be calling her friends, trying to spin this revelation into something that fit her worldview. Dad would be researching my company, finally reading the patents he dismissed as fantasy. James would be calculating how to benefit from his connection to me. Let them. Their actions said more about them than they ever did about me. Dr. Patel appeared at my door. Sarah, the team's ordering dinner. That little Vietnamese place you love. Want to join? I smiled, thinking about the celebration Mom was probably still planning at the country club. Absolutely. As we walked to the elevator surrounded by empty energy drink cans and whiteboards covered in complex algorithms, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was success, not the valuation, not the headlines, but this. Building something meaningful. Leading a team that shared my vision. Staying true to myself even when everyone I loved said I was wrong. The next morning, a package arrived at my office. Inside was an old, worn business card for Chen Imports and Exports and a handwritten note. Found this in your grandmother's things. Thought you should have it. Dad. I pinned the card to my wall, right next to my joke of a business card that he'd mocked just days ago. Grandma Chen would have understood. She would have been proud not of the $900 million valuation, but of the courage it took to get here. My phone buzzed. Rachel this time. The Pentagon's on line 1. They want to discuss potential applications. I smiled, picking up the phone. Time to build something even bigger. Because that's what builders do. We don't wait for permission. We don't need validation. We see possibilities where others see problems, and we have the courage to chase them. As for my parents, maybe someday they'll understand that success isn't always measured in designer labels and country club memberships. Maybe they'll learn that true achievement often comes quietly, wrapped in determination and late-night coffee runs rather than silk and status. But even if they don't, I know who I am. I'm Sarah Chin, and I build things that matter. The envelope from Riverside Community College felt impossibly light in my hands. Inside was my acceptance letter to their nursing program, not Stanford's medical school where I'd been accepted 3 months ago. But it was something. A way forward. A chance to still help people, even if it wasn't quite the dream I'd planned. "You don't have to do this," my brother Michael whispered from his hospital bed. "I'll figure something out. Maybe another clinical trial." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "It's done, Mikey. I already transferred the money this morning. All $287,000 of my college fund, carefully saved since I was born, meant to fund my medical school dreams, now redirected to pay for my brother's experimental cancer treatment, a treatment our parents had refused to help with, claiming they couldn't afford it. It's too risky, Dad had said, not meeting our eyes. The success rates are too low. We've already spent everything we can. He'll die without it." I'd screamed, waving the doctor's reports at them. "This is his last chance." "Then maybe it's God's will," Mom had whispered, crossing herself. "We have to accept." "No," I'd stood up, my hands shaking. "I don't accept that. Not when there's still a chance." That was 3 months ago. Now I sat in a hospital watching my little brother sleep, his body finally responding to the treatment I paid for. The treatment that had cost me my future, my parents' love, and any relationship with my family. The day I'd transferred the money, Dad had called me into his home office. The same office where he ran the family's successful construction company, where he taught me about business and responsibility since I was old enough to understand. "You're making a mistake," he'd said, his voice cold. "That money was for your education. For your future." "Michael's life is more important than my future," I'd replied. "And what about our family's reputation? Taking money meant for education and gambling it on an experimental treatment? What will people think?" I'd stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Who cares what people think? This is about saving your son. It's about responsibility," he thundered. "About respecting your parents' wishes. If you do this, if you throw away your future on this foolish gamble, don't expect any more support from us. No more allowance, no more car insurance, no more living at home. You'll be on your own." "Fine," I'd said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'd rather be on my own than watch my brother die when I could have helped." Mom had cried, begged me to reconsider. "Think about your future, Deanna. Medical school has been your dream since you were 10. Watching my brother die has never been part of that dream," I'd responded, walking out of their house for what I thought would be the last time. Now 3 months later, I was working 2 jobs, waitressing and night shift at a convenience store, while taking prerequisites at community college. My tiny studio apartment barely fit a bed and desk, but it was mine. Paid for with honest work, just like everything else in my new life. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about Michael's progress. The experimental treatment was doing exactly what they'd hoped, shrinking tumors that had been declared inoperable. He even started talking about going back to college himself once he recovered. Our parents hadn't visited him once since I paid for the treatment. Their form of protest, I suppose. Or maybe they couldn't face the evidence that they'd been wrong. "Miss Anderson." A nurse poked her head into the room. "There's someone here to see you. Says he's your parents' business partner." I frowned. "Frank Davidson?" She nodded. "He's quite insistent." Frank had been Dad's partner in Anderson and Davidson Construction for 20 years. He'd been like an uncle to me and Michael growing up, always bringing us presents from his business trips, attending our school events when our parents were too busy. I found him pacing in the hospital waiting room, looking older and more troubled than I remembered. "Diana," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "You look tired, kiddo." "Working 2 jobs will do that," I replied. "What brings you here, Uncle Frank?" He glanced around the waiting room, then pulled me into a quiet corner. "There's something you need to see. Something I've been struggling with since I found out what happened with Michael's treatment." He pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. "These are financial records from the company, specifically from a special account your father set up 3 months ago." I took the folder, my hands trembling slightly as I opened it. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, investment documents. "I don't understand," I said, scanning the numbers. This shows a transfer of $500,000 right around the time Michael needed the treatment. But Dad said they couldn't afford. Keep reading, Frank urged quietly. I flipped through more pages, my confusion growing. These are receipts for a vacation house in the Bahamas, a new yacht? But how could they afford this if they couldn't help Michael? Frank's face was grim. There's more. Check the source of the funds. I turned to the original transfer document and felt my world tilt sideways. The money had come from a trust fund, my trust fund. Not my college fund that I'd donated to Michael's treatment, but a separate account I'd never known existed. Your grandmother left it to you, Frank explained softly. It was supposed to be given to you on your 25th birthday. Your parents were trustees, meant to manage it until then. But they used it to buy themselves luxury items while claiming they couldn't afford to save their own son. My voice cracked. How could they? That's not all, Frank said, pulling out another document. Look at the date they transferred the money. One day after you used your college fund for Michael's treatment. Almost like they were punishing me, I finished, feeling sick. They let me sacrifice my future, my dreams, when they had access to money that could have saved Michael without costing me anything. Frank nodded sagely. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. It's not right, Deanna. What they did isn't just morally wrong, it's legally questionable. As trustees, they had a fiduciary duty. My phone buzzed, interrupting him. A text from my mother, coming to see Michael tomorrow. Please don't be there. We need family time with our son. Family time. After 3 months of ignoring him, of letting me work myself to exhaustion trying to build a new life while caring for my brother, they wanted family time. I looked at the documents in my hands, then at Frank's worried face. Uncle Frank, I said slowly, I'm going to need copies of everything. And maybe the name of a good lawyer. He reached into his briefcase again. Already got them right here, kiddo, and I know just the person you should talk to. I hugged the documents to my chest, thinking about all the nights I cried myself to sleep, believing I'd lost my family's love by defying their wishes to save my brother. All the times I doubted my decision while working double shifts on 3 hours of sleep. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. What I would discover about my parents' financial dealings over the next few days would shake our family and their precious reputation to its very foundation. The law office of Patricia Chen specialized in trust litigation. Her corner office overlooked the city skyline, but she barely seemed to notice the view as she reviewed the documents Frank had provided. This is quite something, she said finally, looking up at me. Your parents didn't just misappropriate your trust fund. They've been systematically moving money around for years, setting up shell companies, hiding assets. But why? I asked. The construction company is successful. Why would they need to hide money? Ms. Chen spread out several documents on her desk. Look at these dates. The first irregular transfers began right after your grandmother passed away. She left significant assets to both you and your brother in trust, with your parents as trustees. My hands shook as I examined the papers. Michael has a trust fund too. Had, she corrected grimly. Your parents emptied it 2 years ago, right around the time his first symptoms appeared. They used a complex series of transfers to make it look like the money was being spent on legitimate medical expenses, but our forensic accountants traced it to personal purchases, vacation properties, luxury cars, private jet memberships. I felt sick. So when they said they couldn't afford his treatment, they had already spent his money on themselves. And when you stepped in with your college fund, they celebrated by spending your trust fund too. Can we prove all this? Ms. Chen's smile was sharp. Oh yes, your Uncle Frank has been keeping very detailed records since he first noticed discrepancies in the company books. Plus, we have something even better. She pulled out one final document, an email chain between my parents and their private banker, dated the day after I paid for Michael's treatment. Need to move Dee's trust fund immediately. She's proven herself untrustworthy with money, choosing to waste her education fund on her brother's foolish medical gambles. We'll put the money to better use. Please advise on most discreet transfer methods. The banker's response was professional but clear. Strongly advise against this course of action. As trustees, you have a legal obligation. Please confirm you understand the potential consequences. My parents' reply, just do it. She's made her choice. Now she can live with it. They put it in writing, Ms. Chen said softly. They're intent to punish you for helping your brother by stealing your inheritance. In my 20 years of practice, I've rarely seen such a clear-cut case of breach of fiduciary duty. I stared at their words until they blurred through my tears. What do we do now? Now? She began gathering the documents. Now we prepare for tomorrow's family meeting, the one your parents don't know I'll be attending. The next day, I arrived at Michael's hospital room early. He was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than he had in months. Are you sure about this? He asked as I set up my laptop. Once we do this, they need to face what they've done, I said firmly, to both of us. Frank arrived next, carrying more files. Then Ms. Chen, elegant and imposing in her court attire. We were ready when our parents walked in. Mom stopped short at the sight of us all. What is this? We said we wanted family time. Oh, this is definitely about family, I replied, turning my laptop to face them. Specifically about how you've been stealing from your children. Dad's face darkened. How dare you? No, I cut him off. How dare you? How dare you steal Michael's trust fund, spend it on luxuries while he was dying? How dare you punish me for saving him by stealing my inheritance too? We did no such thing. Mom protested. That money was… Right here, Frank interrupted, laying out bank statements. Every transfer documented. Every dollar tracked. Would you like to explain the shell companies, the hidden accounts, the suspicious timing of certain luxury purchases? Dad turned on him furiously. You betrayed us. After 20 years? No, Robert, you betrayed your children. I'm just helping expose the truth. Ms. Chen stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, I'm Patricia Chen, trust litigation attorney. We have clear evidence of breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of trust assets, and potentially criminal financial misconduct. Would you like to discuss this here or in court? Mom sank into a chair, her face ashen. Dad looked like he might explode. You ungrateful, he started, but Michael's voice cut through the tension. Why? My brother's question was simple but devastating. Why did you steal my money and let me think I was going to die because treatment was too expensive? Why did you let Diana sacrifice everything to save me when you had the means to help? We were protecting you both. Mom burst out. That experimental treatment, it was a risk. We didn't want you wasting your inheritance on something that might not work. So you spent it on a yacht instead. I asked incredulously. On vacation houses and private jets. We earned that money. Dad shouted. All those years managing your trusts, dealing with investments. As trustees, Ms. Chen interrupted coldly. You were legally and ethically bound to manage those funds for your children's benefit, not your own enrichment. Would you like to see the penalties for this level of breach? She laid out another document, a draft lawsuit with potential damages that made even Dad's face go pale. You have two options, she continued. 1. We take this to court. Every detail becomes public record. Your reputation, your business, your standing in the community, all destroyed. You'll likely face criminal charges for financial fraud. Or, Mom whispered, or you sign these papers now. Return every penny taken from both trusts with interest. Transfer control to an independent trustee, and step down from any involvement in the construction company. You can't do this, Dad protested weakly. The company is my life's work. The company has my name on it too, Frank reminded him, and I have enough documentation of financial irregularities to trigger a full audit. Your choice, Robert. I watched my parents' perfect facade crumble as they realized the depth of their exposure. All their careful deceptions, their manipulations, their cruel power plays, all unraveling in a sterile hospital room while their son watched from his recovery bed. 3 hours later, they left in defeat, having signed everything Ms. Chen put in front of them. The empire they'd built on stolen trust funds and broken trust was over. What happens now? Michael asked into the heavy silence. Now you focus on getting better, I told him. The trust will be properly managed by an independent trustee. Your treatment is fully funded. And when you're stronger, you can go back to college. What about you? Will you go back to Stanford? I smiled, feeling truly light for the first time in months. Actually, I've been thinking. This whole experience, it's shown me something about myself. About what really matters. I pulled out my Riverside Community College nursing acceptance letter. I still want to help people. But I think I can do that just as well as a nurse. And this way, I can start sooner, work while studying, really understand healthcare from the ground up. Michael reached for my hand. You're amazing, you know that? You gave up everything to save me, and somehow you made it into something positive. Not everything, I corrected him. I gave up money and a specific path, but I gained clarity. Understanding of what real family means, not control and manipulation, but sacrifice and support. Frank cleared his throat. Speaking of support, the company board met this morning. We'd like to offer you a position, Diana, Special Projects Manager, focusing on our healthcare facility construction division. Your perspective as someone who's seen healthcare from the patient advocate side would be invaluable. I stared at him. But I don't have any construction experience. You have something better, he said firmly. Integrity. Compassion. The ability to see what really matters beyond dollar signs and status symbols. That's what we need as we rebuild the company's reputation. 1 year later, Michael is cancer-free and back in college. I'm halfway through my nursing program, working part-time with Frank's company to help design more patient-centered healthcare facilities. Our parents, well, they're living in a modest condo now, all their hidden assets returned to their rightful owners. Yesterday, I received an invitation to a charity gala, my first major public event as part of the company's new leadership team. The theme? Building Hope. Healthcare facilities for the future. I showed it to Michael during his weekly dinner visit to my small but comfortable new apartment. Going to be awkward, he noted. Mom and Dad will probably be there. Lots of their old society friends. Good, I said firmly. Let them see what real success looks like. Not yachts and vacation homes bought with stolen money, but honest work that actually helps people. He smiled. Think they'll ever understand what they did wrong? Maybe not, I admitted. But we do. And that's what matters. I pinned the invitation next to my nursing program acceptance letter. 2 pieces of paper that represented choosing integrity over ease, purpose over status, real family bonds over superficial appearances. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted helps you find what you really need. Sometimes the hardest betrayals lead to the clearest revelations. And sometimes standing up for what's right costs you a false family but builds you a stronger, truer one. Next week, I start my pediatric nursing rotation in the same hospital where Michael received his treatment. Life has a way of coming full circle, showing you that the paths you never planned can lead to exactly where you were meant to be. I may not be heading to Stanford Medical School anymore, but I'm building something better, a life based on truth, integrity, and real purpose. And no trust fund in the world is worth more than that.